I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati.
All right. Happy Thursday, guys. My special guest tonight is Solomon Ahmed. He is an investigative journalist, and he is actually the one responsible for a lot of the video footage that you are seeing coming out of Gaza on Twitter. Solomon, thank you so much for coming on.
I appreciate you having me on. Yeah, thank you for having me. In terms of me being responsible, I'm probably responsible for proliferating it on the internet. But in terms of being the source, obviously, I'm not in Gaza. That's the people who are doing the real life journalist work in Gaza, risking their lives. And we already seen 97 of them have already been murdered, and a lot of them have been targeted. Yeah, so I just wanted to clarify that. I don't want to take credit for something that wasn't me.
So one of the things I noticed in a lot of like your posts, one of the things that you continue to say is that they are killing children.
Yeah.
I want to talk about why you believe that the state of Israel is targeting so many children. And then I also want to go into some of these facilities that they've attacked as well, the hospitals, the schools. I heard about a woman recently that was killed at a church. But let's start with the children. In your opinion, why do you believe that they are targeting so many kids in Gaza?
So first of all, they've already killed 7,700 children. So that's almost 40% of the people that have been killed. Now, children do make up a large proportion of the Gazan people. And the reason for that is because they've been continuously bombing Gaza. They've been continuously, and this isn't a new thing from October the 7th. They've always bombed and killed people from Gaza. And so this is what they've done is called, in terms of population trimming. Now, what's the reason for why they're targeting children is because children are the future. And I don't think it's specifically like just a direct attack on children. I think it's just indiscriminate killing of everybody. But what's happening is when you're doing that indiscriminate killing and you know that you're bombing, and where you're bombing, you know that the vast majority of the people within there, or 40%, are going to be children. Essentially, you are targeting children. Now, why I think it's really important is because at the beginning, Israel made a lot of claims. They claimed that a lot of Israeli children had been killed. A lot of Israeli babies had been killed. And we found out that that wasn't true. They claimed that there were 40 beheaded babies. That ended up being fake news. They claimed baked babies. That ended up being fake news. They claimed that there'd been babies that had been incinerated, and that had been fake news. And now we find out, according to Haaretz, which has the figures on it, which is the latest figures is 1,078, I believe, that of those babies, only one baby was killed, and that was in Kibbutz Be'eri. And according to first-hand witness testimony, that was actually killed by Israeli forces themselves. So what that means is no babies were actually killed by Hamas. And that's important because what it then highlights is, look, those guys didn't kill any babies. And actually, these guys have already killed 7,700 children, a large proportion of them being babies.
That's right. I want to get into the hospital, some of these facilities. So obviously, I would say if Russia were to target a hospital in Ukraine, I think the United States government would have no problem calling that a war crime. There wouldn't have to be masses of protest across the globe for Joe Biden or the Biden administration to just openly call it out for what it is. But for some reason, when it's the state of Israel attacking hospitals, they seem to be a little bit hesitant. And it wasn't until after the masses of protests and more of that footage coming out from Gaza, then they started to say they have to follow the laws of war, but they're still not following those laws. I saw a video recently the other day where there was a journalist reporting live on the ground, and there was a hospital that was bombed right behind him. And he said, oh my gosh, that's another hospital. And I believe that the reason why they're attacking the hospitals is to prevent the doctors from actually saving the people who are injured, who can be saved. But I want to hear your take about that, about them attacking these hospitals.
Yeah, so I agree. That's the reasoning, as well as terrorizing the populace. Because if you leave them in a constant state of fear, what will they do? They'll try and get away from the situation that causes fear. And in reality, what they want to do is get them to remove themselves from Gaza, to ethnically cleanse it. And we can talk a little bit more about that later on the show, if you wish. But in terms of what you said specifically, look, today it came out in the Washington Post that Al-Shifa Hospital did not have a tunnel network connected to it, as did not the 5 other hospitals. And this is by mainstream media. And I have my issues with mainstream media, but this is even the mainstream media are stating the same thing. And I had Dr. Mads Gilbert on my show, who has worked in Al-Shifa Hospital over a period of 16 years. And he said that there was no-go areas in Al-Shifa Hospital. And so he could go wherever he pleased. And he never would have worked there if there was a no-go area in Al-Shifa Hospital. And he also explained quite in depth about the specific attacks on hospital, and something you've said as well, that they've actually attacked more than 20 out of the 28 hospitals have been left non-operational, with the rest of them being almost at its knees in terms of operational. And so it comes to the point of, what are they trying to do? First of all, they're trying to terrorize them, to leave them in a state of fear, to, as you said, continue killing the populace, because they want to reduce the populace as well, because they know what they've done. They know that when they're killing these people, there is going to be some form of a reaction, or possible reaction in the future. And so rather than have that, they're just murdering them. And the second reason is, when you terrorize a populace, generally speaking, the populace will try and remove themselves from the situation. Remember, these are largely children and women. So they're going to remove themselves from the populace and remove themselves from the area, because the real plan of Israel, as explained by Netanyahu today, is to take control of the whole of Gaza. And so today there was a report again that came out. I believe it was the New York Times, though I could be wrong. It could be the Washington Post again, where Netanyahu has said that he wants to take control of the whole of Gaza. He doesn't want the Palestinian Authority to have control of it. And even though President Joe Biden from the United States has said that he doesn't agree with this, he's going to go ahead with it. And as you know, there's been Israeli intelligence leaked documents. There's been WikiLeaks documents. There's also been Joe Biden's budget on page 60, which talks about the displacement of these people from Gaza. So the real plan is to take control of the land as well, and to keep control of the entire region. And what's interesting is they kept on claiming that what Palestine wanted to do was to take control of it from the river to the sea. And they claimed that that was genocide, when all that meant was, from the river to the sea, Palestinians will be free. It's a call of freedom. But what they're actually enacting is the actual Likud Charter, which is the entire control of the entire land and the genocide of the entire populace.
How long before you think that more countries of the West, so for example, Germany and the UK recently called for a ceasefire, but that was after it was revealed that the IDF killed 3 Israeli hostages that were waving a white flag, which I've also heard is not uncommon for the IDF to do, to actually target individuals that have a white flag. They don't care. I think they just want to shoot whatever is moving, right? But how long do you think it will be before other countries that are a part of the West try to, in some way, shape, or form, use their power, so to speak, to actually push back against the state of Israel to end this war?
So in terms of the, waving the white flag, that was a prime example of how Israel indiscriminately kills anyone, irrespective of who they were. So these people didn't really look like they were even Palestinians, but it was like, for example, either the Hannibal Directive or they thought they were Palestinian civilians, but they basically took them out. And why the Hannibal Directive is important is basically a directive where they're able to kill their own civilians in order to basically not have issues later, whether it's a hostage negotiation or other issues. And we'll talk a little bit, if we can, about October the 7th in a bit, but what happened on October the 7th is another example of the Hannibal Directive in force. And there's, again, a significant amount of literature, both from the Times of Israel, Haaretz, Maimonides, and many other Israeli publications that have basically revealed what actually happened on October the 7th. But in terms of your question, in terms of the Western countries, look, I believe that none of them will actually do anything in reality. Because what at the moment they've got the United States of America shielding them from any kind of tough decision, and so therefore they can just verbally make statements that really won't have real life impact in terms of anything causing a real life ceasefire. What you've basically got is a few Western leaders, right, who are basically supporting the Israeli cause. Now, the question of why they're doing it is a separate question, and that would require a show on itself in terms of details of why there is this level of control of these few Western nations by Israel. Because in reality, the vast, and even in those Western nations, you see the protests in the United Kingdom. 1.2 million people attended one of the weeks, and we have 500,000, 300,000 people attending every week. Not just the United States. You look at New York, you look at Paris, where it's all illegal to protest, and many other countries. The people are actually against what's happening in terms of the genocide, but there's just a few leaders whom are basically beholden to the Israeli state who are basically supporting this. So yeah, I don't see a change in policy until Israel decides to do so.
I want you to hear something that Larry Johnson said here recently. And for people watching, not Larry Johnson, the basketball player, because I think I mentioned that one time before. Different Larry Johnson. Larry Johnson highlights Israel's goal. So he said this recently on Press TV. Larry Johnson, former CIA analyst. Everyone listen to this.
Their goal is to depopulate Gaza of Palestinians and get them out of the West Bank, too. That's why they're out there arresting it. This notion that, we're going to defeat Hamas, that's our goal, it's this nonsense. It's a lie. That's not their goal. Are they trying to rescue hostages? No, they're not. That's why they killed 3 of them yesterday. Rescuing hostages is not a priority. Depopulating Gaza, exterminating Palestinians from Gaza, whether they're Muslim or Christian or whatever, get them out, because the Israelis want that land. The Israelis want to take it for themselves, and the same applies to the West Bank. So, people need to stop indulging this nonsense that Israel actually has some defined military objectives. They do not. They are accomplishing what they set out to do as far as forcing the civilian population out. But the Hamas fighters they are fighting back, and they are, as I think was noted earlier in your report, causing greater casualties than Israel is admitting to.
Okay, this piece here from Larry Johnson, where he says what I think a lot of us have been assuming for a long time, even before October 7th, that the goal is to push the Palestinian people off of the land. He mentioned the West Bank. I want to pivot to that for just a second, and then we'll come back to October 7th. The illegal settlements that have been happening in the West Bank, the UN says it's illegal. Other politicians say it's illegal. But no one is preventing Israel from continuing to kick Palestinians out of their home in the West Bank. No one is telling them that they have to get rid of those settlements and they have to give those people back their homes. No one's telling them people are still being, ravishly just pushed out. I've seen videos of this. And to me, it's one thing for the UN to acknowledge it, which I feel like they do very well. They're really good at acknowledging that something is happening. But I feel like it stops there. They released another statement today saying that the IDF actually killed 11 unarmed Palestinian men in front of their family members. Again, great to acknowledge it. But it seems like after that, there's no action that takes place to prevent the state of Israel, particularly Netanyahu, from allowing these crimes to continue. What do you think is going to happen in the West Bank moving forward? My prediction is that once they finish with Gaza, Then they're going to do the same thing in the West Bank. And the next thing you know, they'll have the entire area to their self. But I would hope that there would be some type of intervention before that to prevent that from happening. But I feel like the West Bank that's one area that I feel some people are just not really focusing on because of what is happening in Gaza.
Well, I first of all agree with your assessment completely. And that's actually my thought as well. The plan is to take over the whole land, which has been stated in the Likud Charter, which is that they want the whole area. Now, in terms of what you said, 100%, it is illegal internationally what they're doing in terms of the West Bank, taking the settlements, creating the settlements, and illegally taking the homes of the Palestinian people. And you're seeing that. And the level of abuse that's happening in the West Bank has been horrific. And remember, Hamas aren't in control of the West Bank. And what you're seeing is since October the 7th, the number of people that they've detained, the last time I checked, and I checked a couple of weeks ago, was at least 900 people. So the number is going to be in the thousands by now. The number of people that they've actually detained and taken hostage. And the reason I call it hostage is because when they take these people, they don't give them a trial the vast majority of the time. And when they do, they put them through a fake military court where the conviction rate is 99.3%. Only one conviction was ever it was only one situation when a conviction didn't happen. So the people in the West Bank are terrorized. They are treated as second-class citizens. And then when they're taken as hostages, you see the level of negativity they have. So recently, when we had the hostage exchange, where the Israeli hostages were exchanging the Palestinian hostages, when the hostages came out, without even one person disagreeing, they all talked about the horrific nature by which Israel had treated them in prisons. They had been beaten, they had been abused, they had been assaulted, they had been sexually assaulted, they'd been raped. And when they all came back, I posted the videos, all of them thanked Hamas. So even if they didn't have affinity for Hamas before, the fact that they were the reason that they were released from the hostage situation, now you've created some situation where they're seeing some kind of affinity. And it wasn't just her. For example, Ahad Tamimi, who's in the West Bank, who is a well-known activist who became famous as a child because of her activism, was taken just 3 weeks ago, again taken hostage. And they made a fake Instagram post. And when it was exposed that that Instagram wasn't hers, they then basically kept her without ever holding her, without ever charging her. And then she was part of the hostage negotiation. And when she came back, you should have seen her face. She looked like she'd been abused badly, right? Someone who looked extremely strong. And she said that, look, I'm still going to speak out, even though they said that they're going to harm my father, who's also in detention right now. And they threatened me with it. So this is the level of abuse they're putting the people through, because there's, again, they're terrorizing the populace. And I agree with you. In reality, the aim is to ethnically cleanse the entire region and to basically take over it. And something important you said, this isn't a Muslim issue. They're also terrorizing anyone who's Palestinian. Christians is a prime example you mentioned. The Christian population, due to Israeli extermination, is decreasing significantly. It's now down to 800, I believe. And there was many first-hand testimonies talking about how these people are being exterminated. The Christian church, even in Gaza, has spoken continuously and unequivocally about the level of terrorism that's occurring by the Israeli regime. And you just saw recently, not only they first of all killed Justin Amish, his family, who is a senator in the United States, but just very recently they just murdered 2 women who were part of a Christian parish. So this is a targeted attack against both Muslims and Christians, and also Orthodox Jews, because they actually terrorize them in Israel as well. So this isn't a religious thing. This is a ideology that wants to take control over the entire land.
And that brings me to this question that continues to rise and has been mentioned multiple times before. This idea of a 2-state solution. My question is, how can there be a 2-state solution with all of the settlements that exist in the West Bank?
It's a very good question. And we're almost in a window into why a 2-state solution wouldn't work, because in reality, a 2-state solution would be Israel oppressing the other state whatever you may call it. Now, in reality, they don't want a two-state solution because, for example, the Israeli the Israeli ambassador as well as the Israeli foreign minister said, we don't want a two-state solution. We don't want one-state solution. So if they don't want a two-state solution and they don't want a one-state solution, in reality, the solution they want is the entire area. Now, my point is this. They claim that they're a democracy. They claim that they're a Western democracy. You know what Western democracy speaks about? Equal values. No man has more rights than another man. No woman has rights than another woman. All are equal under the state. It doesn't matter what your race is. It doesn't matter what your religion is. It doesn't matter what your ethnicity is. Everyone is equal. So if you believe in that, why not have a one-state solution? Have all man that is equal in that state, irrespective of what your background is. Now, the reason they won't want that is because the ideology of that state is based on supremacy.
That's right. That's right. Now, I want to move into October 7th, because the story has changed so many different times. Let's start there. Let's start with the breakout when they broke free through the gates. And could you explain to people what you have gathered, what you understand about what took place on October 7th? Because like I said, the narrative has been changed so many different times.
It's such an important question that you're asking because not many people are willing to talk about it because, I mean, it's been dramatized to such an extent that even talking about it, people are almost calling you a denialist. But it's not about denial. And by the way, I'm not a supporter of Hamas. Like, I don't have any affinity to Hamas whatsoever. But what I do have is journalistic skills and an intellectual brain to be able to analyze the situation. And like what I've seen is this. And what's clear, and this is just based on Hamas's statements, this is based on Israeli statements, this is based on newspaper articles. Hamas went in. And the reason they went in is because they wanted to go to the kibbutzes, because the kibbutzes have actual military personnel who basically stay in there and are stationed there. And they wanted to go into the kibbutz, take hostages and take them back and then do a hostage negotiation for their own hostages that are kept in Israeli prisons. Thousands upon thousands of them, the vast majority, not vast majority, but a large number of them being children, and actually the vast majority children and women, but a large number of them children. So that was the actual objective. But then what happened was obviously things went wrong. One of the things that went wrong is the music festival. The music festival was only meant to be one day. They made an application, the music festival, just 2 days before to extend it by 2 days. So the music festival was never meant to be there. That was a surprise. So you see, for example, there's a video where a Hamas member says, "Where are the soldiers?" They were surprised. That's the first thing that caused confusion. The second thing was that you saw a scenario where the Israeli army themselves either mass scale applied the Hannibal directive, which is to kill indiscriminately and to take Hamas out, or they lost their minds and they start shooting. So we have, for example, first-hand witness testimony from example Yasmin Porat, who talks about how Israelis were shooting at them, not Hamas. Now, when you look at what actually happened, it's quite clear. Based on the evidence of the Apache helicopters, there was just footage released the other day of Kibbutz Be'eri being shot with short artillery fire and burnt up. There's a testimony in the Times of Israel by someone from the Israeli army saying that we killed 80 people in Kibbutz Be'eri. One of them was a child. So remember when I said that only one child was killed? One baby was killed. Sorry, not child. One baby was killed. That was the one baby that was killed in Kibbutz Be'eri by Israeli forces. So they killed at least 80 people in Kibbutz Be'eri. So there's about 1,000 people who died, of which 695 were civilians. And that number is decreasing each time. But at the moment, let's take that number. And what happened was there was shooting and Israel definitely killed its own people. Now, how many they killed, we don't know. We know Hamas would have killed people for sure as well. And some of them people would have been killed when Hamas was shooting and Israel was shooting and they were shooting at each other. Now, in terms of the video evidence, I've been through it. The video evidence on the GoPros does definitely, and we have to be honest, like it does definitely show 2 to 3 possible incidences of intentional killing of people by Hamas. So I'm not saying it didn't happen at all, but there's definitely 2 or 3. One of them is there's a guy, they have a scuffle and the guy gets away. So you can make the argument that, look, there was a scuffle and he got away. The one does look like intentional killing. And the third one I've just heard about in terms of the video, which is that a short bomb was thrown at a guy. So those are the 3 that possibly are intentional killing. The rest are either unintentional killing, or, and by the way, that 3 you can maybe extrapolate, and maybe it's a bit more larger number. But in terms of actual killing, intentional, it's a very small number. The rest of it is unintentional killing, either by Hamas, largely by Israeli forces when they were shooting at each other. And so that's the reality of what happened. And if you look at the videos that they're sending, so for example, they go into movie theaters and playing these videos, not showing the populace because we can debunk it. And 80% of them videos we actually have access to. They are actually, some of them incidents are actually incidents from other wars. For example, there's an image of a Ukrainian woman on the floor with her underwear out. That's a Kosovan woman from a previous war. There's a video of, have you heard of when they're talking about someone was cut open and the insides were taken out? You must have heard of this. That was actually from a cartel video, not from what happened on October the 7th.
So you're saying, so like, for example, Chris Cuomo is one of those people recently. He has actually said to people that he saw the documentary that happened on October 7th, or the footage that was put together, and he said it was really horrific or whatever. You're saying that those screenings that they're having, which you're right, they're not public, but those screenings that they're having, some of the video footage is actually from other countries?
That's correct. Yeah, it is. And and by the way, the vast majority of that, 80%. So according to Owen Jones, who's seen it, he says at least 80% of that is actually out in the public anyway. So there's only 20% of content that is new. So that 20% we've not seen. I have an issue where they're not showing it. What's the reason? So I had a debate with people from Israel, even the foreign ministry and so on and so forth. And they said that we don't want to show it because of people like you. But what about people like me? Like, I'm going to debunk it. So they're showing it in movie theaters through Gal Gadot and various others. So it's not because they want to respect the dead, or they're showing it in foreign ministries. So the real reason they're not showing that extra 20% is because they'll be debunked like the rest of them. That's the real reason they're not showing it. And another point is, I just wanted to make about this fake idea of mass rape. That is again another example of fake propaganda that occurred, because they want you to believe that there were GoPros and video was there, but for some reason when the rape occurred, there was no video evidence. They also want you to believe that these people were so barbaric that they raped, but then when they went back and they took these people hostages, now they didn't rape them, because none of the hostages that have been released have even claimed that they were raped. Actually, the vast majority have been saying that they've been treated well. There was even a TikTok video of the 13-year-old children who were basically saying it was like a vacation. And in addition to that, some of the accounts about the rape have been debunked already. For example, there was a guy called Nico Ostroga who basically claimed that 29 of his people had been murdered, and that ended up being fake news because he was a settler and he was just making propaganda. There was a guy called Yoni Sardan. Yoni Sardan made the story about Hamas raping 10 people, and one of the women's 10 Hamas people raping a woman, and her face was like an angel. And Yoni Sardan came out and said, I wasn't even there.
I saw that one.
Yeah, you saw that one. So this is the example of like a lot of the propaganda and the rape claims. And again, I had this debate. All of them are basically, none of them are first-hand testimony. None of them is based on medical evidence. None of them based on any kind of physical evidence. It's all based on second-hand testimony. Someone claiming that they saw. And largely, a lot of these people that we've looked into are either linked to Israel, Israeli intelligence, or settlers.
Another question I was going to ask as well, even when they came out with the propaganda about the beheaded babies, I was under the impression, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I was under the impression that that is actually against like their culture to harm children.
100%. So look, when it comes to Hamas, if they follow Islamic rules, it's totally against the religion of Islam to harm any civilian, irrespective of even if it's a child, a man or a woman. No one should be harmed. And also taking hostages. I said this at the beginning. This is where I disavow what Hamas did in terms of taking babies hostage or taking children hostage. It's against the tenets of the religion. Now the question becomes, because I've been thinking about this a lot, and again, this is not my position, it's just something I've been thinking about, a thought process, that actually, if they'd left them children in these kibbutzes, there's a high chance that they would have been killed by the Apache helicopters, by the short artillery fire. You should see the kibbutzes, they're being burnt to the ground by Israeli forces. And so the question becomes, should you take a child who will likely get killed to basically give it less of a chance to be killed. So that's just something that I disagree with what they did, but then maybe that could have been a possibility of what they were thinking. But I just want to be as fair as possible. Where they've done wrong, I will say, and where they've not, where it seems like they've not done wrong, I have to like speak about it, and I think that's the right thing to do.
What do you think? Because when I listen to a lot of what has happened since October 7th, it's really interesting to me that the Zionist narrative seems to be, let's start with that date. Yeah. And anytime you want to mention anything about the occupation, the previous caloric diet, the oppression, the dirty water, the fact that Israel controls the resources and that the Palestinians are actually just caged in like cattle in Gaza, anything about the illegal settlements in the West Bank, I noticed they start to get very flustered. I saw several interviews on Rising where this would happen the moment you mention, well, what about what happened before October 7th? And the reality is, at least to me, had there not been the occupation, had there not been the oppression, had there not been this forceful removing of people, Palestinian people, from their homes, we wouldn't have had an October 7th. But I feel like the Zionist narrative does not want to talk about that.
I completely agree with you. And before we found out the reality of what happened on October the 7th, let's say it was as bad as they lied about, right? Then the question became exactly what you said, that if you look at the way they were treated, they were kept in a concentration camp, essentially. They were kept as a slave race. And the real question becomes, look, if you're a slave, if you've been kept in captivity in your house and you're finally freed, you're finally let out, and you're in front of your captor who has been treating you like this, has been abusing you, has taken food away from you, taken water away from you, killed you on a regular basis, killed your mother and children on a regular basis, and you're finally in front of your captive and you're having the ability to, do something about it. We live in the West, so we can't understand that psychology because we've never experienced it. I've lived a very privileged life in terms of being in the West. One of the best countries. I'm from the United Kingdom. It is one of the best countries in the world in terms of giving us this, freedoms and access and so on and so forth. But in terms of, imagine you're living in that life. What would your mindset be? What would your thought be? What would you do to get out of captivity? And so in reality, even as you said, what happened before October the 7th is more important. Sorry, not equally important, is more important because this is the manner in which they're being treated. And yet, despite being treated like that, it looks like October the 7th was nothing like what they claimed. It looks like it was a military objective to go to the kibbutz, to get hostages, to get their own hostages released. The hostages who have actually been treated horribly in Israeli dungeons.
How do you feel about this report that came from the New York Times that the Israeli intelligence actually knew a year prior to October 7th that Hamas was planning this attack and chose not to do anything about it because I guess they didn't really take it seriously or thought there's no way they would be able to do this? How do you feel about that? Because I kind of feel as though if I were to see something like that, and I know these are people that we were occupying and we were oppressing, I would not choose to ignore it unless I wanted it to happen.
So I have seen that report and I'm a bit dubious about it. And I'll explain why. Because when you look at the events of what happened on October the 7th, it does demonstrate extreme panic from the Israeli forces side. And so the actions do not demonstrate a people that thought this was going to happen. Now, it is possible that, for example, there was intelligence and maybe Netanyahu had it and then they didn't want to pass it along. But because it's come from the mainstream media and we know, when it comes to mainstream media, they do propagate propaganda. I'm a bit dubious about it. I feel like this has been used in order as a mechanism to later use against Netanyahu to make him the fall guy or to use it against somebody to take them out. I don't actually believe that they actually really knew about it or there was real intelligence. I believe this is like fake propaganda, basically fed to the mainstream media through the deep state. Now, this is my opinion. My opinion could be wrong, but I'm not convinced by this idea that they knew 1 year before.
That's an interesting point. I want to ask you a question about some of the other Arab countries, the surrounding Arab countries. Israel is also bombing Lebanon and Syria. Last time I checked, Hamas isn't in Lebanon and Syria. And then you also have the situation with the Houthi rebels from Yemen that intervened in the Red Sea and said, no, you're not going to send these weapons to Israel. We're going to make this very difficult for you. The Biden administration actually called on other countries to join them in this effort to, I guess, possibly start a war with Yemen, as if Yemen needs any more catastrophe, any more disaster done to their country at this point in time. And what was really interesting is that Saudi Arabia said no. And I say that's interesting because the United States government gave weapons to Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia used those weapons on the people in Yemen. Also, we also said at that point in time that that was considered to be, quote unquote, a genocide as well that was happening to the people in Yemen. But this time around, Saudi Arabia has turned their back on the United States. And I want to get your take about that. And do you think that any other countries such as like Jordan or Egypt may intervene here as well?
Yeah, it's a good question. And again, I don't think that Saudi Arabia going against them is something that is, again, legitimate. I just think it's something that was used as a propaganda piece, because in reality, if Saudi Arabia wanted to do something about it, they have the mechanism, they have the international relations with the United States to ensure that that it doesn't happen. Now, in terms of Saudi themselves, they actually, as you said, they've been oppressing the people from Yemen for a significant period of time. So I again don't think that this is a legitimate situation where they've basically decided that they're not going to be part of it. Now, in terms of the Yemeni Houthi, as you said, they've done done a very impactful job, because they've basically cut off the trade routes. It's going to cause financial impact both in the United States, in the West, in the United Kingdom, and so on and so forth. So in terms of what they've done what they've done has been impactful. In terms of people turning their back on Israel, I don't think so. For example, I do think even when Erdogan speaks out, I think it's really just it's not something that's legitimate. He's doing it to basically garner favoritism within his nation who have affinity towards the Palestinian people. But if you look at it from an actual political perspective, he's not made any moves whatsoever that can even harm the Israeli economy. He continues to provide them with oil and so on and so forth. So I think some of these leaders are just basically saying it to save face, or because what happens in a lot of these countries, Arab countries, as he said, is the people actually are with Palestine, even if the leadership aren't. And so even though someone like the leadership of Saudi won't care as much about his people in terms of what their view is, but in reality, there is this situation where they're trying to play the PR game a lot more. If it was something really impactful, then I don't believe Saudi would actually do anything that's really impactful that goes against the interests of the United States.
And I want to get your take about Russia and China, because they also have spoken out in reference to this war. Vladimir Putin actually recently just had a trip to the Middle East, where he also met with the Prince of Saudi Arabia. And there are talks there in reference to what to do about Israel and Gaza. I'm curious, where do you think Russia and China would land on this particular issue?
So Russia is interesting, because they've kind of got like a dual interest or a dual purpose in this. So on the one hand, they're for the pro-Palestinian position. And the reason for that, again, is because it's kind of against the West American position, because the Americans are pro-Israel. And so Putin does fall under the pro-Palestinian position in that regard. And so if you look at a lot of his comments and a lot of his statements, they have been all about giving Palestinians their rights, providing them with a solution. I had the Russian foreign minister on, and he basically said the same thing, that look, and it's something you mentioned earlier as well, that if Russia had done anything like this, there would have been uproar throughout the world. If Russia had attacked buildings, if Russia had attacked civilians, there would have been an uproar throughout the world. If Russia had bombed in the same manner, there would have been also. And actually, he claimed that Russia were the only ones who are basically attempting to cause some kind of ceasefire in the United Nations. So that's definitely the position in terms of from that perspective. But when I said dual purpose, what I mean is not in like 50-50, but what I mean is obviously Russia does have relations with Israel as well. There is significant, again, trade relations and so on and so forth. So they won't want to harm them as well. So there is these extra aspects that to consider. So I don't think, again, Russia would go all in on one side, but at the same time, they have been a lot more vocal than anybody else and attempting to create some form of peace in the area.
One more question for you, Solomon. if it were not for the protests, do you think we would even see as much pushback as we're hearing right now?
I think the protests have been huge. I think that if you look at it, the people have spoken out, and I do believe in the power of the people, because protest is important. Protest is important for two reasons. One is, as you said, as I said, to basically vocalize your disdain for what's happening in terms of what the people in power are doing. So you saw that in various other things, people protest against Iraq. And the second thing is, protests are important because it gives people an outlet to basically give up, to basically direct their frustration in a certain manner. And so anyone who's trying to ban protests, such as, for example, in the United Kingdom, it was Suella Braverman, that would have caused a huge uproar in the United Kingdom and could have caused a lot of anarchy. And it's a lack of understanding of how human behavior works. But not just the protests, also what's happened on X. On social media, but X and TikTok, but mainly X, have been one of the few free speech platforms. Now, I don't believe X is completely free speech. So, for example, if you look at my account, it is the 34th biggest account in the whole of Twitter and the second biggest political account. But if you look at my engagement, it's 100x compared to the Zionist accounts. And yet, if you look at my views, they're about 100x lower. So even though my account is the biggest, it could have been even bigger, but there is some kind of something going on there in terms of it. So if you compare my account to the Zionist account, there is some difference. And even then, I'm still the top 34th account. So there is not complete free speech. Also, on top of that, there have been people banned who hold the pro-Palestinian position. And yet people on the pro-Israeli position have had carte blanche to ask for genocide. And there's been no problems. And we've posted about many of those examples. But despite that, we're still on. Some of us are still on, and we're able to basically expose the lies. And some of the lies that we've exposed is the 40 beheaded babies. We exposed the Al Ahli Baptist Hospital bombing. We exposed the chemical attacks, fake news that they were trying to propagate. We've exposed the tunnel issues. We exposed the Apache helicopters bombing, and now we're continuously posting what's happened on October the 7th. And that's been allowed to happen on Twitter, and that has had a severe impact, because immediately after October the 7th, because I used to run the biggest Twitter spaces on Twitter. I was the host of it until this issue, and I was forced to basically leave it behind because I had the pro-Palestinian position. But basically on there, people were coming on, military experts from the United States as well as from Israel, who was literally saying we need to burn Gaza to the ground. We need to turn it into a parking lot because of this dramatization of what happened October the 7th, such as the 40 beheaded babies. And so these debunkings have been monumental. There's been hashtags that have significantly trended that have been monumental. And that caused the IDF to do Twitter spaces, the IDF to start posting on Twitter and Israel. So it shows the impact has been huge, and it has stopped them from being full on genocide mode. But still, they've committed an extreme genocide. They've killed 1% of the populace. Just imagine that. That's like the United States killing 3.5 million people. Imagine murdering 3.5 million people. That's the level of genocide that's occurred. So even though it has halted them to an extent, and I do believe it has, because I think they would have just bombed it and killed maybe hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions immediately. There is still a large number of people who have been murdered.
Well said. Solomon Ahmad, where can people find your work?
Right, people can mainly find me on Twitter. My handle's on there, which is Sheikh Suleiman. I do post on there regularly, and they can find me on Rumble at the moment, although I'm probably going to move on to other platforms with the same. No, it's not. It's Suleiman Unsilenced on Rumble, where we'll be doing interviews. We had a short break, but hopefully we should be back soon.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
All right, guys, that was Solomon Ahmad. Again, follow him on Twitter. That's where I've seen a lot of those videos from that you guys see me share on here in reference to this conflict. So definitely follow him. He does great work. We're going to go ahead and give a shout out to patrons. Then we'll share the thumbnail and get into other stories that we have to discuss tonight. We will do call in tonight because there is a lot to discuss tonight in reference to tea. Okay. So tonight we are going to discuss Donald Trump is removed from the Colorado ballot. You'll notice there's a picture of Vivek Ramaswamy right behind Donald Trump. We're going to get into that and what this could mean for future candidates as well. We're also going to discuss Jeffrey Epstein list is coming, ladies and gentlemen. And I said, oh, snap. Because I didn't think that this would actually happen, but it appears it is going to happen as soon as January, We're also going to discuss Joy Reid, Piers Morgan, and Chris Hayes make a change. What is happening there? And we just discussed the overall goal from Netanyahu and Israel with Solomon Ahmad just a couple of minutes ago. Want to give a shout out here to Sabby patrons. Thank you guys so much for your support. You're out here doing the damn thing. If you're interested in being a Sabby patron, I have 5 categories: Ultimate, Sabinators. There's also Sabsters, Sabbies, and of course, members. All of their names are listed here, and you can also see their names scrolling across the bottom of the screen there on the ticker. Thank you guys so much for your support. Really do appreciate you there. Appreciate you. A friend of mine used to say that. Appreciate you. Okay. Let's go ahead and get into the first story. Actually, I want to shout out these first. Busha says, Sabby, please interview Ryan Dawson, DD Geopolitics, Rabbi Yaakov Shapiro. I can do that. I can reach out to them. Dwayne says, I loved Larry Johnson, the basketball player, LOL. And Just Steve says, so glad I found your channel, Sabby. Great stuff. Thank you so much. Okay. Let's get into this first story here about Joy Reid, Chris Hayes, and Piers Morgan, because now it seems to be okay for pundits in mainstream media to actually start to criticize the state of Israel. And again, they were very timid about this, like in the beginning. After October 7th, they were speaking out, obviously, in favor of the state of Israel. They were criticizing the Palestinians and Hamas. There was no separation for a long time of the Palestinian people and Hamas. I noticed that across different media platforms and mainstream media. But then something changed. More video footage started to be released from Gaza, mainly from a lot of investigative journalists like Solomon, who was on earlier, and also more independent media. And eventually it just got to the point where you could not ignore the casualties that were happening, and you had to start asking some questions. So now we are starting to see mainstream media pundits, including ones like Piers Morgan, of all people, starting to now take a step back and critique the state of Israel. And some of that has to do with the lies that have been exposed on mainstream media, like this one from the Foreign Affairs Minister. Oh, this was a doozy. The interviewer in this clip said one of our colleagues said her family members were targeted in a church compound in Gaza. So listen to this take here. So here's the Foreign Affairs Minister. Listen to this.
Well, we're now joined from Tel Aviv by Yuli Edelstein. He's the chairman of the Israeli Parliament Foreign Affairs and Security Committee. Thank you very much for coming on the program. You heard our member of parliament, Leila Moran there, her relatives, 6 of them, targeted by Israeli army snipers in a church compound in Gaza. What on earth is going on?
Well, that's the question to Leila, not to me. I think that I can only say that we as the Jewish people are used to blood libels. So to hear that Israeli snipers are targeting women on purpose and not letting them leave the church is something that reminds me usually the atmosphere in the Middle Ages before another holiday.
Are you saying it's a lie? Are you saying it didn't happen?
This is a flat lie, absolutely. No Israeli sniper ever purposely targeted any civilian, to say nothing about women.
Well, we're now joined from Tel Aviv by Yuli Edelstein. He's the chairman of the Israeli Parliament.
Listen to this questioning again.
And Foreign Affairs and Security Committee. Thank you very much for coming on the program. You heard our member of parliament, Leila Moran there, her relatives, 6 of them, targeted by Israeli army snipers in a church compound in Gaza. What on earth is going on?
Well, that's the question to Leila, not to me. I think that I can only say that we as the Jewish people are used to blood libels. So to hear that Israeli snipers are targeting women on purpose and not letting them leave the church is something that reminds me usually the atmosphere in the Middle Ages before another holiday.
Are you saying it's a lie? Are you saying it didn't happen?
This is a flat lie. Absolutely.
So first of all, a number of mainstream media outlets have already reported it and confirmed it. So this is a thing that we've noticed. Again, we've watched the state of Israel just blatantly lie, even when there are times where there's video footage. We watch Mehdi Hassan actually sit up there and debunk Netanyahu's advisor, where he tried to lie and say, well, I don't know what was written on the paper on the wall, when it was clearly that was a calendar that the IDF was pointing to in the hospital. And they don't like it when you catch them in lies on air. Even Christine Amanpour actually had to finally acknowledge what is happening to people in the West Bank. So they covered this on CNN as well. It says in her latest report, Namel Begir documents how the West Bank settlers are escalating attacks on Palestinians. Listen to this. This was on CNN.
We stop at a service station in the occupied Palestinian West Bank. A man in military fatigues demands to check our IDs.
I have the right to secure this area, and I need to check who you are and what you're doing here.
He has no identifying insignia, won't tell us who he is, but he's got a gun. So we oblige. We're confused, and we're not the only ones.
You guys see this? This is the Palestinian people. They're basically under military occupation. This guy said, shut your mouth, I'll start shooting. Imagine if, and we have police brutality in this country, but imagine if the police were allowed to just occupy neighborhoods. And don't get me wrong, there are neighborhoods that they do go into and they do harass. But imagine if they were able to occupy neighborhoods at gunpoint every day. And they would threaten you and tell you, don't you even speak, I might start shooting. This is what Palestinians have been living under for decades. CNN finally has to acknowledge it.
CNN obtained this video from inside Hebron, a divided city, filmed a few days after the Hamas October 7 attack. The Palestinian man won't comply. He says he recognizes the man with the gun as a settler, not a soldier. In this tense climate, if a soldier issues an order, you comply. But is everyone with a gun and fatigues a soldier?
There's that question as well.
The West Bank is under Israeli military occupation. It's also believed to be home to almost 750,000 settlers, Israeli civilians living in the occupied territories. Settlers consider this part of their biblical homeland and are expanding into Palestinian territories, even though the UN Security Council considers their presence illegal.
And this goes back to what I said before about the UN. Okay, United Nations, it's great that you're saying this is illegal, but what are you going to do about it? So the United Nations is just good for making statements. They don't actually, there's no action implemented after they have made these statements. And this is very much terrifying. And I think we really have to, again, we can't just focus on Gaza. We also have to focus on what's happening in the West Bank as well. But again, you're seeing this on CNN.
Yet settlers are integral to Israel's security plan in the occupied territories, as Israel Defense Force reservists and settlement security squads. Responding, the IDF says, to security threats in settlements, towns, and villages. Palestinians told CNN they consider armed settlers a greater threat than ever before. Their remit from the IDF is blurring the lines as settlers encroach on Palestinian land.
So you have settlers who are now armed. First of all, the soldiers shouldn't be armed against the Palestinian people anyway. But now you have people who are they just live there. These are just people who are settlers who kicked Palestinians out of their homes. Now they have chosen to pick up arms and they're making the same demands as the IDF. This is insane. This would be like your neighbors deciding to arm themselves, not saying that they're not allowed to have a gun or whatever. But imagine your neighbors, say you live like in a little subdivision. Imagine your neighbors all like arming themselves and pointing their arms towards you. This is what people have to go through.
Like here, in the Palestinian village of Tuwani, where there's a settlement at the top of the hill. In this video, you see men in military fatigues. The IDF equips both civilian settler security squads and soldiers in the region. As you can see here, it's almost impossible to differentiate. They point their rifles at residents and then they shoot, according to eyewitnesses.
Settlers just pointing their weapons at residents and just shooting them. We're going to scoot up a little bit more here because I want you to hear what this guy says.
Military fatigues are forcing Palestinians off their land.
These settlers and with their guns, and they're pointing it to the head of the residents, and they tell them, if you don't leave in 24 hours, we will shot you. So the family would understand that they're not playing. It's a serious threat of killing if you don't leave your home. That led for like 35 families to leave. And these settlers have been wearing uniform also.
Settlers have heavyweight support in Israel's far-right government. Itamar Ben-Gvir, Minister for National Security, settler. After the Hamas October 7 attack, Ben-Gvir loosened gun permit regulations, making it easier for tens of thousands of Israeli civilians to bear arms. Bezalel Smotrich, Minister of Finance, settler. Also post-attack, pushed through over $100 million for West Bank security, including funds for training and equipping settler security squads. But it's not just arming and equipping. We witnessed firsthand some of the restrictions the IDF imposed on Palestinians. Ihtidal's house is not even 5 minutes away from the other side of this checkpoint, but she can't get through.
Every day they tell her to go back, and every day she has to do this extraordinarily long loop to try and get in. She said they are intentionally making it difficult for us, making so we have to cross through areas that are hostile to us to get to our homes.
Yep.
Ihtidal picks up a few more things before she sets off home, but not too many. It's a long walk uphill. Since the 1990s, the city of Hebron has seen many curfews. The day we visited, there was a curfew in place from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. Ihtidal has to go through this checkpoint. Palestinians have to be searched. Settlers aren't normally checked.
Could you imagine just going to the grocery store and then you're just trying to get home and you're stopped multiple times on your way and you're searched and you're checked? And again, this doesn't happen to everybody. They're just doing it to the Palestinian people.
Ihtidal has to walk. Settlers can drive. Palestinians need permission for visitors. Settlers don't.
How is this not apartheid? Listen to the laws of the land. She said the Israelis there can drive. She said Palestinians have to walk. They got to get approval for visitors. If your friend wants to come to your house, they have to get an approval just to come to your house. This is crazy.
The IDF says all these measures are in accordance with their security assessments to provide security for all residents. Settlers and Palestinians live side by side, but the rules for each are very different. Faiza and her husband have lived in this house for 14 years. They inherited it from her husband's grandparents. Their house is overlooked by an IDF sentry post, yet they fear for their safety.
This scene is so inappropriate and depressing for our home. You can see up here what we've had to put in place to protect ourselves from the settlers.
As we leave Faiza's house, we get stopped by an Israeli soldier. He says we're not allowed to walk along the main road. We have to go back to the checkpoint to be searched again.
You hear that? Multiple searches.
Because we've been inside a Palestinian home.
I would just point out a lack of logic, which is that these Palestinian houses, the Palestinians have come through that checkpoint, so they can't have possibly brought in anything.
Sorry, just so I can understand, just so I can understand, because I'm really confused, as usual.
So, even though we went through that checkpoint,
okay.
Even though we went through that checkpoint,
Yeah.
because We have been in the house of Palestinians. We now have to go jumping over people's garden walls.
So we can't walk on the streets?
We can't go straight down.
Come back.
If you were going through the checkpoint and you stay here, it's great. But as soon as you move from different areas,
yes.
So you need to get
now do you understand it?
Oh.
Yes. So we need to get.
This is what I was trying to tell people when I said they can't move freely. But many people will tell you, oh no, there's no apartheid, right? Okay, so that's on CNN, guys. CNN is covering that. So it's gotten to the point now where even Piers Morgan, of all people, is having to finally admit that what Israel is doing is wrong. Nico shared this earlier. He said, sheesh, Ukraine lost NATO and Israel lost Piers Morgan in the same week. It's been a rough month for the puppets of the empire. Listen to Piers Morgan here.
London, welcome to Piers Morgan Uncensored. Throughout the long and deadly history of Israel's wars with Palestine, it's usually fallen to Israel's friends to tell them when it's time to stop. That time may be fast approaching again, even as Israel insists it needs more time to eradicate Hamas. It can only have itself to blame. This weekend, the IDF admitted to killing 3 of its own hostages in Gaza. The men were waving a white flag of surrender. They'd used scraps of food to scrawl SOS, desperately pleading for help. Regardless of whether they were Israeli or Palestinian, there was no justification under international law for killing them. It's a clear breach of the rules of engagement.
Did you guys just hear that? So here's Piers Morgan, who has just been debating so many people the past couple of weeks about this particular issue. Norm Finkelstein, Rabbi Shmuley's been on there, Cenk Uger's been on there, and he's kind of notorious for that question, but do you condemn Hamas? Okay, so he's kind of notorious for that, but do you condemn Hamas? Even he is now saying that what the IDF did there is a violation of international law, regardless of who the hostages were.
What does that tragedy tell us about the way Israeli soldiers are treating Palestinian civilians? How seriously should we now take Israel's insistence it's doing everything it can to keep innocent people alive? In a separate incident, 2 innocent women were reportedly shot dead by sniper fire at a Catholic church in Gaza. One of them was leaving the church shelter to go to the toilet. Cardinal Vincent Nichols, the Archbishop of Westminster, one of Britain's most senior spiritual leaders, was scathing.
It's certainly a cold-blooded killing.
The Israeli Defense Force says it didn't happen, it wasn't them.
Well, I think that's hard to believe, frankly, because the people in Gaza and the Cardinal Archbishop of Jerusalem, they're not given to tell lies.
So you don't believe the Israeli Defense Force?
No, I don't.
Well, the Pope went even further. He said that what Israel's doing in Gaza now constitutes terrorism.
Unarmed civilians are being bombed and shot at, and this has even happened inside the Holy Family Parish complex, where there are no terrorists but families, children, and sick people with disabilities, nuns. Some say it's terrorism, it's war. Yes, it is war, it is terrorism.
The British government is shifting its position too. Foreign Secretary Lord Cameron, in a joint statement with his German counterpart, said he backs a sustainable ceasefire and said that too many civilians are being killed. Ben Wallace, the influential former Defence Secretary, said if Benjamin Netanyahu thinks a killing rage will rectify matters, then he's very wrong. His methods will not solve the problem. In fact, I believe his tactics will fuel the conflict for another 50 years. His actions are radicalising Muslim youth across the globe. I think he's right. All this after President Biden accused Israel of indiscriminate bombing, his starkest warning yet that America's backing is not unconditional. Well, news reports about the war in Gaza today will state that 18,000 Palestinians have been killed so far, according to the Hamas-run health ministry. And the key point about that often quoted sentence is not the debate about whether Hamas exaggerates those figures, is that Hamas is still in charge and able to release them as official numbers. After 2 months of war, endless atrocities, and the full might of Israel's army unleashed on this tiny strip of land, the very people they're supposed to be eradicating are still firmly in power.
That part right there. The people that Israel is supposed to be eradicating are still in power. They have not rid Gaza of Hamas. They have not taken out Hamas. They have taken out thousands of civilians. I saw a total today that said 25,000. And I told you as time goes by, that number will continue to increase because, again, That's not the full body count. You have to wait until they pull all the bodies out from underneath the rubble. So the number is actually higher than what they're telling you that it is. And they're still continuing to bomb and kill civilians in Gaza. None of these actions that the IDF has done has taken out Hamas. And if they know that Hamas is in the tunnels, then why aren't they going into the tunnels? You see, make this make sense, people. Ro Khanna brought this up. And Ro Khanna, don't get me wrong, he's a fraud too. But Ro Khanna even brought this up. He said when the U.S. government went after bin Laden, they isolated the situation. They knew he was underground. They went underground. In this particular situation, if you know, and they have said this, if they know that Hamas is in the tunnel, why are you bombing the hospitals, the schools? And it's because of what Solomon said, because they want to eradicate the entire culture and population. They are killing journalists because they do not want the news to continue to get out so people can see what's happening in Gaza. That's why. That's why. Piers is late on this. I wonder if Piers is going to issue an apology.
Only about 20% of Hamas terrorists so far, even if you accept IDF figures on this, have been killed. 80% remain alive and fighting. Well, most civilized countries and decent people back Israel's fundamental right to exist and indeed its duty to defend itself. But the war is now starting to look more like retribution than strategy.
And at this point in time, how are they still defending themselves? If you and I get into a fight, and let's say I just happen to punch you in the face, and let's say I struck the first blow, and you knock me out, and I'm already down on the ground, but then you in turn go and you decide to fight everybody else around me who is not attacking you. How are you still defending yourself at that point if you already struck back the first time? And this is a question that people need to start asking. I'm sorry, we got to keep it real. People need to start asking this question. It's not a matter of whether or not you condemn Hamas, Piers Morgan, or if you support the state of Israel. The question that you should be asking anyone who comes to you with this: do you support the right for the Palestinian people to have self-determination and to be free? That's what this is really about. And if they say no, that tells you everything.
That suspicion is fueled by hardliners in Netanyahu's government and by Israeli commentators making appalling remarks like this.
I
support the war crimes. He laughs, as the other presenters laugh as well. Well, the rest of the world does not support war crimes. And if Israel...
Did you hear that? You see what he said? I'll read it to you. I mean, it's blatant. This is overt. It's overt. It's not even covert. They're not even trying to hide it. They are saying these things on interviews that they don't want them there.
That suspicion is fueled by hardliners in Netanyahu's government and by Israeli commentators making appalling remarks like this.
He says, I am for the war crimes. You see this? I don't care if I'm criticized. Again, it's blatant and out in the open.
I support the war crimes. He laughs, as the other presenters laugh as well. Well, the rest of the world does not support war crimes. And if Israel does have a plan and proof that it's working, it needs to start showing the evidence of that plan very soon.
So that's Piers Morgan starting to change his tune. JB says that is overt fascism and totalitarianism. Yeah. They want to mention that in reference to Donald Trump, but if it's Israel, we can't talk about it. And then there's Joy Reid. Even Joy Reid is starting to have criticism of Israel. Now, in this particular clip, she's calling out Nikki Haley. Now, I said before, obviously, if you're a Democrat, it's easier to call out a Republican. That's easy for you to do. Joy Reid needs to also call out the Democrat establishment politicians who are also backing Israel and are very vocal about it and are taking a lot of money from AIPAC like Hakeem Jeffries. But she's not going to go there because she still wants to keep her job at MSNBC. But listen to what she had to say here about Nikki Haley.
Okay, here was Nikki Haley, supposedly the Republicans' moderate alternative to Trump, talking about Israel and Gaza. Go.
When you look now and they talk about a two-state solution, every day that I was at the United Nations, it was never Israel opposing a two-state solution. It was always the Palestinians and Iran opposing a two-state solution. They never wanted that because they want to eliminate Israel altogether. So a two-state solution is not a true conversation because if you've ever talked to them, they don't want it. The Palestinians don't want a two-state solution.
I don't think that Nikki Haley has actually spoken to the Palestinian people. I'm just keeping it real. Okay. I don't think she has. She's like, if you talk to them, I don't think Nikki has talked to them.
What I think Israel should do and what I think America should do, we should support whatever Israel thinks will keep them safe.
Okay, let's get into it. Here's a little bit of the history of the Oslo Accords and a couple of clips about who's for it, meaning the peace process, and who's against it. Roll 'em.
Did you know this peaceful handshake between Israeli and Palestinian leadership was awarded with a Nobel Peace Prize? Yet 30 years later, peace seems like a distant dream.
Ladies and gentlemen, we kindly ask that you remain seated during the document signing.
The first of the Oslo Accords was signed on 13th September 1993.
Remember, guys, this happened under President Bill Clinton.
It should have marked the beginning of the end to the Israeli occupation of Gaza and the West Bank.
We have been granted the great privilege of witnessing this victory for peace. Just as the Jewish people this week celebrate the dawn of a new year, let us all go from this place to celebrate the dawn of a new era.
After a year of secret meetings in the Norwegian capital Oslo, after which the accords were named, a plan was established for Israel to withdraw from parts in the West Bank and Gaza. Plans were also made to transfer governing duties to a Palestinian interim government, which later resulted in the creation of the Palestinian Authority. Occupied Palestine was divided in three areas. A. Under full Palestinian control. B. Civil control, and Israel and Palestine would have joint security control. And C. Would be under control of Israel except over Palestinians. Both parties were given 5 years to follow up on the plan, and afterwards negotiations were set to reach permanent decisions on unresolved issues. A year after signing the Oslo Accords, the Nobel Peace Prize was awarded to former Palestinian Authority President Yasser Arafat, former Israeli Foreign Minister Shimon Peres, and former Prime Minister of Israel Yitzhak Rabin for their efforts to create peace in the Middle East. However, the Oslo peace process quickly entered a cycle of failed negotiations until it ultimately collapsed during the 2000 Camp David summit and the Second Intifada. Afterwards, attempts were made to restart negotiations towards a two-state solution, but they never resulted into conclusive agreements. 30 years later, Palestine is still illegally occupied by Israel, and Israeli settlers frequently construct new settlements in occupied Palestine under protection of the Israeli army. In 2019, Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas said he would suspend all agreements with Israel after it demolished dozens of Palestinian homes on the outskirts of occupied East Jerusalem. Although Abbas made his threats before without implementing them, in 2020, he also said he would end security agreements with the United States and Israel. And 2022 was the deadliest year for the West Bank since the Second Intifada.
إننا نطالبكم اليوم رسميا ووفقا للقانون الدولي وقرارات الشرعية الدولية بإلزام إسرائيل باحترام قراراتكم هذه أو تعليق عضويتها في الأمم المتحدة.
Do you see that part? To make sure that Israel follows those resolutions or Israel's membership in the UN would be suspended.
Middle East Eye's editor-in-chief David Hurst said,
"It is painfully clear that the prospect of creating a Palestinian state alongside one that defines itself as Jewish is zero. There are 700,000 settlers in the West Bank and East Jerusalem, and not an Israeli politician or movement in sight who is prepared to remove them."
as he looked back on 30 years since the Oslo Accords.
On 4th of November 1995, the fifth Prime Minister of Israel, Yitzhak Rabin, was assassinated.
How convenient. You see, every time there's someone who wants to do peace, they just seem to get assassinated. MLK, Malcolm X. What was the other one I was going to mention? MLK, Malcolm X, or they're jailed. Nelson Mandela, JFK, and I'm pretty sure Nikki knows this, but she doesn't want to mention it.
Yitzhak supported the Oslo Peace Accords. He was assassinated by a supporter of Benjamin Netanyahu.
Then, and we have to pause there because of YouTube. You guys know how YouTube can be about this. So anyway, the person who wanted to move forward with peace was assassinated. And then we move forward to Benjamin Netanyahu.
And said so on worldwide television.
That's Netanyahu saying the first thing to do is to strike all of them and to strike hard. And this is him bragging about scuttling the Oslo Accords. The individual here says, hold on, but then again, the world will say that we're the aggressor. He says the US, I know how they are. America is something that you can easily maneuver and move in the right direction. He brags about not being afraid to go against the Clinton administration and not being afraid to go against the United Nations.
הסכמי אוסלו שהכנסת חתמה עליהם, שאלו אותי לפני הבחירות, נקיים, בתנאי כפוף להדדיות וצמצום הנסיבות. אבל איך נצמצם את הנסיבות? אני אתן פירוש להסכם שיאפשר לי להפסיק את הדהירה הזאת לקווי 67. איך עשינו את זה? אף אחד לא אמר מה זה אתרים צבאיים מוגדרים. אתרים צבאיים מוגדרים, אני אמרתי אלה אזורי ביטחון. בקעת הירדן, מבחינתי זה אתר צבאי מוגדר. נכון. זה אוקיי. אף אחד לא... לך תגיד. אבל אז הייתה שאלה, מי יגדיר מה זה אתרים צבאיים מוגדרים? קיבלתי מכתב מקריסטופר, אליי ולערפאת, באותה לשון, שאומר שישראל בלבד היא זו שתגדיר מה הם.
See? He said that Israel will define the military facilities, their location and size, and he said Israel alone will do that.
את מיקום האתרים הצבאיים האלה ואת גודלם. עכשיו, הם לא רצו את המכתב הזה, אז לא נתתי את הסכם כמובן. הפסקתי את ישיבת הממשלה, אמרתי, אני לא רוצה. רק כשהגיע המכתב, תוך כדי הישיבה, אליי ואל ערפאת, חתמתי על הסכם. תגיד לו שעדיף לתת 2% מאשר לתת 100%. וזו הברירה שם עומדת כאן האתרים. ואתה נתת 2%, ובזה עצרת את הנסיגה הזאת.
Is there still a chance for a two-state solution?
I think it's about time for the world to realize the Oslo paradigm failed on the 7th of October, and we need to build a new one. And in order to build a new one...
Does that new one include the Palestinians living in a state of their own? Is that what it includes?
I think the biggest question is what type of Palestinians are on the other side. This is what Israel realized.
Do they have a state, though?
The answer is absolutely no, and I'll tell you.
See this? So when Nikki Haley, what Joy Reid was pointing out, when Nikki Haley made that statement and said the Palestinian people didn't want it, look at what's being revealed here. Netanyahu didn't want it. This woman here, Israeli ambassador, also did not want it.
Tell you why.
Well, then how can there be peace? How can there be peace in
the reason there is no peace
Israel
is because the Palestinians,
without offering
Mark,
a state to Palestine, how can there be peace in Israel?
Israel knows today, and the world should know now, the reason the Oslo Accords failed is because the Palestinians never wanted to have a state next to Israel. They want to have a state from the river to the sea.
So the two-state solution is dead.
Okay, so you just saw that was not true. Again, mountain of lies that we've seen told on national television. So even Chris Hayes is actually speaking out against it now. Yes, emoji guy himself. Listen to what Chris Hayes had to say here on All In with Chris Hayes.
But that aside, the deeper problem here is that if you spend any time at all reading the Israeli press, listening to what Israeli leaders and commentators are actually saying, it is very clear that for a lot of people in government, the mass destruction of Gaza, raising it like Putin raised Grozny or Assad raised Aleppo, is the point, the goal. Many prominent members of the Israeli governing class don't think there is such a thing as an innocent civilian in Gaza, have said that everyone in Gaza deserves their fate.
None of them were saying this immediately after October 7th. None of them were saying this. Now it's true. It's true. They now have the go ahead to do so. In fact, that makes me want to address this question from Obama Loves Larry Sinclair. Thank you for the super chat. Why is the mainstream doing true journalism all of a sudden? That is a good question. Maybe because they realize that independent media has now become such a threat. Also, their ratings, at least at CNN, their ratings are terrible. But I think, again, because a lot of the video footage that has been coming out of Gaza has been from Al Jazeera or independent media. Mm-hmm.
From Knesset member Meirav Ben-Ari saying that, quote, the children of Gaza have brought this upon themselves, to an Israeli military spokesman saying the emphasis of Israel's military campaign was, quote, on damage and not on accuracy, to Israel's president, Isaac Herzog, suggesting there are no civilians in Gaza and everyone is a legitimate target, to journalist Shimon Riklin, who said this on Israeli TV.
חס וחלילה, פשע מלחמה זה אני, אתה רגל על הגב. פשע מלחמה זה אני מודה, אני אגיד את זה פה, לא אכפת לי שירדו עליי, אוספים פה חומרים. אני לא נרדם טוב בלי שאני רואה בתים קורסים בעזה. מה אני אעשה? עוד בתים, עוד מגדלים, שלא יהיה להם לאן לחזור.
He sat there and said he wanted to see more of them destroyed. And the statement that was made before that one, where he held a newspaper article where the guy said there are no civilians in Gaza, that statement was made October 16th. And a lot of these major outlets were still silent, still not willing to criticize Israel.
Not a fringe view in Israel. I mean, even the Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, invoked the lessons from the biblical story of Amalek and addressed the nation in Hebrew in the end of October. And in that biblical chapter, God commands King Saul on how to respond to an attack by the rival kingdom of Amalek. Quote, now go attack the Amalekites and totally destroy all that belongs to them. Do not spare them. Put them to death, men and women, children and infants, cattle and sheep, camels and donkeys. Now, I will be the first to confess, I have no idea what to do about Hamas or about what comes next. But the Amalek method cannot be the solution. To be honest, I'm not particularly convinced the Israeli leadership has any idea what comes next. Many want full destruction. And Hamas also wants this war. They have been clear on that. I think they want it to continue. They seem to think all of this death and destruction benefits in the end because of the rage it will produce towards Israel. But whatever your views on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, it is just plainly the case that our country is supporting a war whose animating moral logic looks to most of the world, and frankly to me, to be that every single last person in Gaza is guilty and deserves their lot. And that is the moral logic of Hamas. It is the moral logic that drove the atrocity of October 7th. And an atrocity like October 7th cannot justify whatever comes after it, whatever the response. There is no terrorist attack, no matter how horrific, and truly October 7th was horrific, that can wash clean what we are seeing in Gaza and what we as Americans and our government are abetting.
Can you believe you heard that from MSNBC? You see what I mean? It took 25,000 people being killed for him to make that statement. But the reality is this did not start on October 7th. As you heard earlier, again, we've talked about this before multiple times on the show. They have been terrorizing, oppressing, kicking people out of their homes, putting Palestinians on a caloric diet. 90% of the water is dirty, preventing Palestinians from even fishing on their own coast, controlling all the resources, beating Palestinians in the middle of the street, humiliating them in front of people. This has been going on for decades. And it took the state of Israel killing 25,000 of them in this short time frame for the mainstream media pundits to finally speak up. You don't get there without investigative journalists that were actually in Gaza, Al Jazeera, independent media, and the massive protests all across the globe. You don't get there without that. And I continue to say till this day, vote for whoever you want, but the power comes from the people on the outside, the people in the streets. That's how these movements have been won. The civil rights movement was not won in DC. It was won in the streets. The women's rights movement was won in the streets. Now, yes, there was political legislation that came after that, but it was because of the movement outside in the street that pushed the politicians to do the right thing. Go to some of the comments here, but things are changing. Thank you for the super chat, Quintessential. In uni where you worked at, what % of the students were true leftists? What were the rest of them like? Did anything about their politics shock you? So you have to understand, like, I was an academic advisor here in Boston, Massachusetts. So I'm already living in a place that for the most part can be pretty progressive. Just keep that in mind. But I would say most of the students were pretty progressive. And I worked with like that Gen Z group. So most of them were pretty progressive if they were into politics. But there were also students that were conservative as well. And then some students just weren't interested in politics at all. But most of them here were more so progressive. David said the future Sabby described is honestly like the Purge films, but in real life. David said, but do you condemn Hamas, Piers? I know. He killed me with that. Thank you for the super chat, P. Smith. The Christians in Bethlehem canceled Christmas. And Auntie Shawnee TV, I'm glad you're showing the video I wrote you about that came out years ago. Thank you, Sabrina. You are welcome, Auntie Shawnee. If you haven't had a chance to do so, go ahead and smash that like button for me. That helps me out with the algorithm. Thank you very much. And we're going to keep on moving on. We are going to the next story here about Donald Trump in Colorado. And I want to start this story by saying this. For just a moment, as we go through this story, I want you to try to put your political ideology to the side just for a second. So if you're a Democrat, put that to the side. If you're a Republican, put it to the side. If you don't know what you are, you probably already ready for this. And I'm asking you to do that because it is very clear to me that people who are against this tend to be a part of one party, and people who are for it tend to be a part of another party. I don't want you to think about it in those terms as we go into this story. I want you to ask yourself this question. Is what is happening in Colorado to Donald Trump, is that the right thing based on the law? Now, I know this might be hard because it's easy to try to go with your side, but I want you to think about it. Is it right based on the law? Let's go ahead and get into this clip here. Colorado has removed Donald Trump from the ballot. This decision came from the Colorado Supreme Court. What does this mean for Donald Trump going into other states as well? And what does it mean for any political candidate in the future? Let's go ahead and dive into this story here.
So we've actually just got some breaking news out of Colorado. We're going to stay with Christy Greenberg and Hugo Lowell to talk about it. The Colorado Supreme Court ruling that Donald Trump has now been disqualified from being on the primary ballot for the GOP. Again, this breaking news out of Colorado. Donald Trump, as we know, was fighting to be able to be on that primary ballot. The Colorado Supreme Court now issuing a 200-something page opinion that we've just got. And we're going to go back to Christy Greenberg and Hugo Lowell. I know, guys, you haven't had a chance to look at it. We're looking at it right now. It's 217 pages. But Christy, I want to start with you on this particular issue. This is not the first state that there's been an attempt to be able to disqualify Trump being able to be on the ballot. But what's intriguing about it is that it's now being done in a way where the judicial system is having a say in terms of whether or not somebody can be on a ballot. Your thoughts about what we're hearing coming out of Colorado at this time?
Well, it is an interesting decision because the Colorado District Judge, Sarah Wallace, last month, when she made her decision, she had a really puzzling decision where she found, based on the evidence, that Trump had engaged in insurrection, but essentially said, well, Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, it doesn't apply to presidents. He's not an officer such that it applies to him, which was a really odd result. So when that was appealed, I think a lot of people had been scratching their heads and thought the appeal was appropriate. And, I haven't read the basis of this, but it sounds like at least the Colorado Supreme Court said no. Actually, if he engaged in insurrection, yes, he is an officer and the 14th Amendment would apply to him. It would be a perverse result otherwise to have it apply to members of Congress and others in lower elected officials and not to the President of the United States.
So let's go ahead and pause there before we get into the thick of it. First question. Was it an insurrection? By definition, was it? Not by what your feelings tell you, not by what your political party tells you, but by definition, was it? Because if it is not by the definition, then Colorado was wrong. If it is by the definition an insurrection, then Colorado is correct. But even if Colorado is correct, is it right for a Supreme Court to make a decision to remove someone from the ballot? And I want you to pretend for a second it's not Donald Trump. Let's pretend it's someone you really like. And what if that happened? My fear is that this can actually spiral. They can come up with different reasons to remove other people. What if they decide we're just going to take Jill Stein off the ballot? We're going to take Cornel West off the ballot. We're going to take RFK Jr. off the ballot. We're going to only make it so that the only people that can be on the ballot in this state is the Republican nominee and the Democrat nominee. How would you feel then? I know a lot of you want to support third parties. I support third party independent. How would you feel then? But again, do you believe, based on the definition, that it was an insurrection? Because if it's not, think about that for a second. We'll go on a little bit more here.
So it sounds like Colorado Supreme Court got it right in finding that this should apply to the president and presumably determines that the factual findings of the district court in finding that he engaged in the insurrection were upheld. So it is a result that is interesting. It is a result that seems like the right result. The big question will be whether or not it holds, because this is surely going to the U.S. Supreme Court. And I have a lot less confidence that the U.S. Supreme Court will decide that Donald Trump should be disqualified from the ballot, given that conservative majority on that court.
Okay. Now I want to go to another segment here. The state is Colorado. Now, Black majority state migration contraband, long name, made a really good point. I want you to see this for a second. Never trust headlines. They are intentionally deceptive. Colorado is a Democrat stronghold that didn't vote for Trump twice. This unconstitutional action is irrelevant to the 2024 election. So just as a reminder, folks, Donald Trump did not win Colorado in 2020, and he did not win Colorado in 2016. In 2020, you'll see here, Colorado is blue. And in 2016, even though Hillary Clinton lost, she still won Colorado. So both Biden and Hillary Clinton won Colorado. I wanted to make this point just to remind you, it's not like Colorado was going to go to Donald Trump anyway. It has become more of a blue state. But would it stay that way? Right? So they think by doing this, this is actually hurting Donald Trump. I would argue I don't think it is. And I'm going to show you the next steps that they are planning to do so that this actually ends up helping Donald Trump. It seems like every time they try to find ways to take Donald Trump down, it seems like these decisions just help Donald Trump. That's the funny part. That's the part. All of the lawsuits against Donald Trump right now actually helped him increase in the polls. It didn't make him decrease in the polls. His polling increased. Now, Joe Biden has issued a response in reference to Donald Trump's ruling here in reference to Colorado. Shout out to Case Study QB for this. Listen to what Joe Biden has to say. It's interesting.
Well, I think certainly it's self-evident. You saw it all. Now, whether the 14th Amendment applies, I'll let the court make that decision. But he certainly supported an insurrection. And no question about it. None. Zero. And he seems to be doubling down on about everything. Anyway, I've got to go do this.
But even to that again, so he said, no question, Trump supported an insurrection. But do you consider it to be, based on the definition, of insurrection? I saw this morning on Rising, maybe I'll go over this tomorrow. I saw this morning on Rising, Alan Dershowitz was debating Breonna Joy Gray. Part of it was about this issue in Colorado with Donald Trump, and then part of it was about Israel and Gaza. But one of the things that Alan Dershowitz said is that if you look at the definition based on insurrection, that includes violence. So he said it actually wasn't one. Now, how do voters feel about this decision in reference to Colorado? The Colorado Supreme Court ruling on Donald Trump, it says 84% of Democrats approve, 8% disapprove. 48% of independents approve, 35% of independents disapprove. 24% of Republicans approve, 66% of Republicans disapprove. So again, this is people thinking about this in reference to partisan politics instead of thinking about that question that I asked you at the very beginning of this segment. Do you consider it to be an insurrection based on the definition? Because if not, that throws everything out. That's why I asked that question. Now, they did actually interview voters in Colorado, and I want you to hear what some of the voters had to say. Let's go into this clip here from CNN.
We've been talking about Colorado, but we're not in Colorado. So the question is, what do Colorado voters think about the ruling that bars Trump from the primary ballot? Our Gary Tuckman, always quick on the draw, traveled to the state to ask just that.
This coffee shop in Douglas County, Colorado goes by the simple name of coffee. And it's here where we have a simple question for customers. Tell me your gut feeling. Do you think it's a good thing the Colorado Supreme Court did that or not a good thing?
You know, I'm not the biggest fan of Trump, but I don't think people should be taken off the ballot necessarily.
This man is a political independent in a very Republican county. So here in the county seat of Castle Rock, it's easy to find loyal Trump Republicans who feel the same as this man. What do you think of the Supreme Court decision?
I think it's unfair.
How come?
Government shouldn't get in that position to control votes for certain candidates.
But we did find this Democrat who says that's precisely what this court needed to do.
I think it's a great decision. I think that when you try to overturn an election, you don't get to run again. You know, we have a 14th Amendment for a reason.
Back inside coffee, loyal Trump supporter Tony Klanaris doesn't take this decision seriously. She thinks the Supreme Court taking Trump off the primary ballot is a result of game playing. Why do you think they're playing a game and not doing their job?
They're part of the game.
And what's that game?
Not being honest.
But you think that Trump has been honest?
For the most part, yeah.
Her
See, again, this is partisan thinking.
Friend concurs, saying that she feels
Outraged. Absolute outrage.
Why were you outraged?
They're going to take away our choice based on their personal beliefs, because I don't believe they're speaking for the people.
But El Gray believes the justices are.
So let me just chime in here for just a second. I think the problem with this is the fact that it makes it look like the Democratic Party is that afraid of Donald Trump beating Joe Biden and Donald Trump becoming president again, that they're willing to go so far as to remove him from the ballot so that that's not even a possibility. So they're not giving the voters a choice. And to that, I say, if they want Donald Trump to lose, then let him lose at the ballot box. But removing him from the ballot, it cheapens it in a way, right? It's just like everyone knows that Joe Biden is doing so poorly. We all know that he's in some type of mental decline. We all see this happening right before our eyes. We know that Donald Trump is beating Joe Biden in the polls. We know that Joe Biden has not done well for the economy. People are still struggling. He has not handled foreign policy situations well. We have 2 new wars under Joe Biden. Younger voters are turning away from Joe Biden. African-American voters have been turning away from Joe Biden. So we all know this. We see these things happening right before our eyes. And it gives the impression, whether it's the intent or not, it gives the impression that they're trying to help Joe Biden win. And that's how a lot of people are going to see it.
She's an independent who has voted for Donald Trump, but says she won't be voting for him again if he ends up back on the ballot.
I agree with their ruling that he engaged in insurrection, yes.
So do you think it was the right thing to do?
For my state, yes.
Keith Raymond has voted for Donald Trump twice, but says this time around he's supporting Chris Christie. His opinion is more nuanced.
It's a complicated issue, but if the law is the law and the Supreme Court is stating it, we have to abide by it. Doesn't mean I'm a fan of it.
Many Coloradans are still digesting the court ruling. The varied opinions in this shop about Donald Trump, symbolic of countless discussions in this state and this country. Kelsey Nistel is a Democrat.
I think that what he did was unacceptable for our country, and he should face the consequences for that.
Jake Herman is a Republican.
I think if that was a legitimate thing that happened, if he was part of an insurrection, he would have been arrested. He wasn't arrested.
That part right there. See, that's the piece that people are starting to point to. And this is what I was saying in reference to the law. The point that he made there, if it was an actual, insurrection, I'll be careful how to say this on the YouTube. He said that he believes that he would have been arrested if he didn't, if he broke the law. Donald Trump has not been convicted of this. He's not been convicted. They may be trying to charge him, but right now he's not convicted. So we can't say that he's been found guilty. Again, we're just looking at the standard of the law, not what we feel inside. So how can they do that based on the January 6th if he actually has not been found convicted of doing so? This is what I mean when I say let's focus on the law. Something we got to think about.
Colorado primary is March 5th. Omar, at least on this day, we did not talk to any fervent Trump supporters who plan on switching to a different Republican candidate on primary day if Trump's name is no longer on the ballot. Instead, what we heard from some people is they plan to write in Trump's name. But under this ruling, a write-in vote for Trump would not count.
Did you hear that part? Okay, so people have brought this up. They said, well, they can just write his name in. Notice what he just said. Under this ruling, a write-in vote for Donald Trump in Colorado would not count. So I did want to say that because I didn't want people to think that that was an option. Not saying you can't do it, but they're telling you it's not going to count. Now, there's something else that could be happening here that I do want to mention as well before we get to Vivek. I want you to also think about this, and I want you to think about donors. Let's remember, it was just a couple of months ago after Ron DeSantis announced that he was running. Remember, what was reported is that the donors had decided to get behind Ron DeSantis. Rupert Murdoch, who owns Fox News, had also decided to get behind Ron DeSantis. This was revealed when Tucker Carlson was removed from Fox News. That's what the donors want as the Republican nominee. As time went by, though, and Ron DeSantis wasn't really doing too well in the polls, and he's still kind of stagnant there a little bit, not performing as well in some of these debates. And they started to see, well, maybe Nikki Haley is who we should latch on to. Nikki Haley also is getting a lot of money from donors. I have seen a Nikki Haley ad every day. Every day. Okay? So that's another person that they could be leaning towards. What I'm saying is that it could be that the donors have decided to get rid of Donald Trump. Donors, billionaires, the military-industrial complex, corporations, Wall Street. It could be that they decided we got to find a way to get him out of here because he is still beating Joe Biden. We need to push forth someone else. And the only way that Ron DeSantis and Nikki Haley are going to significantly increase in these polls and actually be some type of threat is if Trump is out the way. Just an idea, just something to think about there. And then there's this situation with Vivek Ramaswamy. Now, Vivek Ramaswamy, after this was reported, he actually has come forward. And he said that he himself, make sure I go to this really quick. He said that he himself is now deciding that he also wants to remove himself from the ballot in Colorado. So now let me pull this up because I think I had the wrong clip. Sorry. So make sure I pull this up. Okay, here we go. Now, make no mistake. This is a power move by Vivek. He's not polling particularly well. He was polling pretty well, actually, like after the first debate, but his polling numbers, they dropped, they decreased. So he's not polling well. At this point in time, Vivek Ramaswamy is not running for president. Vivek Ramaswamy is running for vice president. So it could be that Vivek Ramaswamy does see that this is a problem to remove someone from the ballot, and he does take issue with that. But it could also be that Vivek Ramaswamy is also trying to show to Donald Trump that I'm the person that you should pick for your VP. Sometimes two things can be true at the same time. So he released this statement. Listen to what he had to say after it was announced that Donald Trump was going to be removed from the ballot in Colorado.
They have just tried to bar President Trump from the Colorado ballot using an unconstitutional maneuver that is a bastardization of the 14th Amendment to our U.S. Constitution. This was a provision, Section 3, that was designed to bar Confederate members, people who switched to the Confederacy, from actually being able to serve. That's very different than what's at issue here, to say the least. This is a hollowed out husk of what the country was built on. The basic principle that we, the people, select our leadership, not the unelected elite class in the back of palace halls. That's old world Europe, not the United States. That's why I'm making a pledge today that I will withdraw. I pledge to withdraw from the Colorado GOP primary ballot unless and until Trump's name is restored. And I demand that Ron DeSantis and Chris Christie and Nikki Haley do the same thing.
This is a power move. Not just him saying himself, he's going to withdraw his name from the ballot in Colorado, but also he is actually challenging Ron DeSantis and Nikki Haley to do the same thing. So now it looks some kind of way. If they're not willing to do that, that can say something to voters. I am not a Vivek supporter, but this is excellent PR. Great PR strategy. It gets his name trending again. His poll numbers could increase. And also it lets Donald Trump know that Vivek could be a good option for his VP. That's how I see it. I see this as a PR. Pete said gangster move, whatever you want to call it. I see this. That's a great PR strategy. You don't have to like the candidates, but that was actually pretty smart. Just keeping it real. He continues here.
Or else these Republicans are simply complicit in this unconstitutional attack on the way we conduct our constitutional republic. I refuse to be complicit in that. I think what they're doing is wrong. And I think it's up to Republicans to step up and stand up with a spine for our country's future. That's really what's at stake. Whether we, the people, actually have a say in deciding who leads this country. Yes, it would be easier for other Republicans like me who are running in this race to say, hey, if Trump is sidelined, there's our opportunity. No doubt other candidates are probably privately celebrating with their corporate sponsors. That's not the right thing to do. I think the most useful thing that every GOP candidate can do right now is to join me in that pledge. I'll say that I will withdraw from that Colorado GOP primary ballot until Trump's name is restored. This belongs to the people, not to the unelected Democratic cabal of judges in Colorado or any other state. And I demand that Ron DeSantis and Nikki Haley and Chris Christie do the same thing, or else they're complicit in what this security state is trying to do to shut down Trump. I stand by that, and I expect them to do the right thing.
Chess move. Nikki, Ron, Chris, are you going to be brave enough to do the same thing? He put the ball in their court, and if they don't do it, it looks some kind of way, right? Looks some kind of way. Now, there's a little bit more, something else that Vivek did announce as well. It's not just Colorado, because you see now California is considering removing Donald Trump from the ballot. Now, obviously, California, again, is a Democrat stronghold. Donald Trump didn't win California in 2020. He didn't win California in 2016. I would predict he would not win California in 2024. But the point is that this can become a trend. This can spread. And what if it does spread to some of those states, like those swing states that he's actually polling pretty well in? Vivek said now California is trying to remove Trump from the ballot, citing Colorado. DeSantis, Haley, and Christie should join me in pledging to withdraw from the primary in any state that removes Trump from the ballot. That's the only way to stop blatant election interference in the GOP primary. And he is retweeting this here from Citizen Press. Breaking: California Lieutenant Governor Eleni Konakoulis calls on the California Secretary of State to explore every legal option to remove former President Donald Trump from California's 2024 presidential primary ballot. You know, it's like a rash that's spreading. Now, they have already come up with a solution. You see, the GOP has already decided that there is a way around this. Go figure. They have decided that, okay, if California wants to take him off the ballot, fine. We will just switch to a caucus system which will actually benefit Donald Trump more. I kid you not, folks. Let's go ahead and get into that clip here. I told you these things always continue to backfire.
Republicans rallying around President Trump after the Colorado Supreme Court booted him off the state's GOP primary ballot. The justice's ruling he violated the 14th Amendment by engaging in insurrection on January 6, 2021.
The Colorado Republican Party now threatening to switch to a caucus system if the former president ultimately loses a challenge at the U.S. Supreme Court level. This would be a very difficult challenge for the party. However, the move would allow people to vote for Mr. Trump in order for him to still earn delegates from the Centennial State. Tom Dempsey live in Washington. Tom.
Hey, good morning, Adrian. Yeah, this morning, frustration is growing among Republicans in response to this decision to disqualify former President Donald Trump from appearing on the Colorado state primary ballot. Not only could we see the Colorado Republican Party change the way it chooses its nominee, but even some Democrats are coming out saying that this could end up helping Mr. Trump. Now, one key thing to watch for in the days and weeks ahead will be similar challenges filed in multiple other states. The case in Colorado remains one of many involving the 14th Amendment and whether or not Mr. Trump's involvement on January 6th can be considered taking part in what's being called by Colorado as an insurrection. According to Lawfare, the nonprofit group, 13 states have pending cases and 2 others have pending appeals. While Colorado disqualified the former president from appearing on state primary ballots, 4 other states, including Florida and New Hampshire, dismissed similar lawsuits. Many fellow Republicans are rallying around the former president. Not only are his fellow competitors in the primary coming out against the decision in Colorado, Republican Senator Tom Tillis plans to file a bill aimed at preventing states from blocking presidential candidates from appearing on ballots. Texas.
Did you hear that? A bill aimed at preventing states from blocking presidential candidates from getting on ballots.
Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick took it one step further and even said President Joe Biden should be taken off the ballot due to his handling of immigration. David Axelrod, who once served as a chief strategist for former President Obama, saying, quote, all the legal challenges that have been thrown at Trump have so far helped strengthen him in the Republican primary as he depicts himself as a victim. Colorado will be the same.
I would not be surprised. I would not be surprised if, because of what Colorado has done, I wouldn't be surprised if more of the independent voters in Colorado come out and support Donald Trump just because of this. Even people who probably did not support him before are probably like, oh, screw that. That's messed up. And they may go out and vote for him anyway, just simply because of this.
Seems like kryptonite winds up being battery packs in the GOP primary. Speaking to reporters, though, President Joe Biden made it known that he believes former President Trump took part in an insurrection on January 6th.
Well, I think certainly it's self-evident. You saw it all. Now, whether the 14th Amendment applies, I'll let the court make that decision. But he certainly supported an insurrection. And no question about it. None. Zero. And he seems to be doubling down on about everything.
Now, since that ruling came down in Colorado, NBC News released a report saying that the amount of social media threats against the state Supreme Court justices have spiked, including posts with violent words, posts with personal information about the justices, like their office addresses being posted, as well as, messages involving pictures with weapons. And again, violent words. So again, a serious angle to this story as well, guys.
Yeah, really tense times we're living in. It's not even 2024 yet. Tom Dempsey, thanks so much.
Thank you for.
Okay, so again, they're trying to find a workaround. They could switch to a caucus, which would make it eligible for people to actually vote for Donald Trump in Colorado. So I told you, like, these, whatever it is they're trying to do, it obviously is not working, and it's just helping Donald Trump. If the GOP does do that, that would actually help Donald Trump. That would not hurt him. So this is mad crazy. They would have been just better off just leaving it as it is, because like I said, it's not like he won Colorado anyway. It's a blue state for the most part. So to me, it doesn't make any sense. But it's not just Donald Trump. When we talk about removing candidates from the ballot, I just want to remind you, it was just a couple of weeks ago I told you that the state of Florida actually decided that none of the Democrat primary challengers to Joe Biden are going to be on the ballot. They remove Cenk Uygur. I always forget his name. This is bad. What's that other guy's name? Dick? No, Bill? Roy? What's his name? Why do I always forget his name? Anywho, Cenk Uygur, Marianne Williamson, and whenever that other guy's name comes to me, that's bad if I don't remember your name. That's really bad. I don't think you're doing too well in the polls. Thank you, Dean Phillip. Thank you, atheist dude. And Dean Phillip, they removed them in Florida, but now other states are removing them as well. Marianne Williamson tweeted this out. The DNC is at it again. We've discovered the Massachusetts Democratic Party intends to include only Joe Biden as their primary candidate on the Massachusetts ballot. That's my state. I don't know what to tell you, but it doesn't surprise me. It does not surprise me. She goes on to say, Dem Chair Steve Kerrigan's misplaced attempt at protecting Joe Biden robs Massachusetts Democrats of their voice and choice in the upcoming election. This action is a flagrant violation of the DNC rules and process. Goes on to say here, I have actively campaigned in Massachusetts. Secretary of Massachusetts has the discretion to include FEC filed candidates who've received national media coverage, which I have. We hope Secretary of the Commonwealth will protect Massachusetts voters from Mass Dem's attempt at circumventing democracy. So here's an update. Florida, Tennessee, North Carolina, and now Massachusetts. This is a pattern, and we cannot let it stand. So it started with Florida, and it spread. And this is what I was saying in reference to Donald Trump. First, it was Florida. Now you have Tennessee, North Carolina, and Massachusetts are not allowing any other Democrat candidates to be on the ballot. Now, I will say what I've said before on the show. I believe that Marianne, Dean Phillips, Cenk Uygur, all these people should be running outside of the duopoly. They should not be running through the Democratic Party. I told you time and time again, we all know the DNC cheats. They cheated Bernie Sanders in 2016 with the superdelegates. There was a whole DNC fraud lawsuit. The Becks, they were the lawyers that handled that case. Jared Beck wrote an entire book about it called What Happened to Bernie Sanders. You would think by now people have learned that you cannot do this way because the DNC picks the candidate that they want, which they're allowed to do, which was ruled in court by the judge during the DNC fraud lawsuit. And on top of that, when they told you that Joe Biden is going to be the nominee, that was also a cue to let you know they were going to do whatever they could to make sure that you would not be in the way. So I asked you at the beginning of the story to put your political ideology to the side. And I said that because I wanted to show you that at the end. There are some people who watch me are Dems, some are independent, some are Republican. But I wanted you to see it happens on both sides. At the end of the day, who wins? The donors. They're the ones who win. They're the ones making the decisions. They're the ones deciding who they want to be in the office. Big money talks. I don't know what to tell you, but I think this is a dangerous thing. I really do. Again, ask yourself that question. If we're looking at it by the definition and we're looking at the law, first you have to ask, is it an insurrection based on a definition? Then has he actually been convicted of it? And he hasn't. Now you see this is also spreading to other candidates. This is what I was trying to warn people about. I'll go to some of the comments here and then we'll get to the Epstein story. Miss G says this is terrible no matter how you feel about Mr. T. Oh, you call Trump Mr. T. Interesting. I pity the fool. Pete says Colorado is against democracy. Thank you for the super chat, Anthony. More like insurrectile dysfunction. You had to go there, Anthony. Marco says even if he's off the ballot, citizens could just write his name in. Not in Colorado. That was something I wanted people to hear. Not in Colorado, you can't. Thank you to Georgia Freckles for becoming a Sabby member. Let's give Georgia a big whoop whoop. And thank you for the super chat. Obama loves Larry Sinclair. I'm sorry, but I don't trust MSNBC. We shouldn't trust them at all. Any corporate media. Jeffrey Epstein. I didn't believe this at first when I actually read this a couple of days ago, but I was like, there's no way. But no, hold on, way. It appears it's actually happening. A federal judge has just ruled that they are going to unseal 150 names from Jeffrey Epstein's list. This can happen as early as January 1st. Hold on to your seats, get your popcorn. We're going to talk about this. And then I'm going to make this connection to what was just announced in reference to the Diddy case and why I think there could be a connection there in reference to Epstein. Let's get into it.
Alleged sex trafficker, rapist, dead, Jeffrey Epstein. Ended his life in jail, right? Some believe there's some conspiracy, whatever. The official word is that he hanged himself in 2019 before the trial began. Or did somebody kill him because they didn't want their name out there? It's a conspiracy theory. Today, we learn the names of 177 of Jeffrey Epstein's friends, recruiters, and victims will be revealed in court documents unsealed at the start of a new year. What does this mean? Let's bring in high-profile criminal defense attorney Mark Garagos. I got to tell you, the more straight-line analysis on this is what Dusty just sent me about the D.C. madam and her list of clients being released. Now, that's something that I get why people wouldn't want their name exposed, that they're on that list. But here, why do we know that these people must all be bad people?
You know, it's interesting that this question is coming from Chris Cuomo, because Chris Cuomo, again, remember, he was accused of sexually harassing his own coworkers. It's really weird. You know, I don't know if he's the best person to do the story. I don't know. I just feel a little bit weird about it.
Well, I wouldn't say that they're all bad people. I think a number of the people who are named here, at least based on what the judge's order says, were complaining witnesses or victims or just Confederates, for lack of a better term. But I think it's obvious to me that there is an interest here and that there are people who are going to be named who don't want to be named. Mind you, there has been litigation already surrounding this over people who did not want to have their names revealed. And clearly, I think that the timing of this is going to be such that it's going to be grist for the mill of people who do have a lot of conspiracies. I mean, I have read no less, as I'm sure you have, than 3 or 4 different theories as to the deaths surrounding this and the prosecution surrounding this and the suspicious timing surrounding the death and the filings. And
but it's become such a scarlet letter.
It just perpetuates this.
Hey, thank you for watching. Please.
Okay. So it's kind of interesting. He said it becomes such a scarlet letter. I mean, I don't understand why Chris Cuomo would have a problem with. I told you I didn't think he was the best person to cover the story, but I want to get to this point from Dion. What about the redacted names? So that's another point I was going to mention. It appears that 3 names will remain sealed. Now, I don't know who those 3 people could be, but I'll let you guys make a guess in the chat. Who do you think those 3 names are? And it must be someone very important, high profiled, if those names are going to remain sealed. And that's not justice. Told you we have an injustice system. Their names are protected because of who they are, so they don't have to be punished for their crimes. I want to go into this clip here that says we'll never know all the answers from Jeffrey Epstein's case. Let's get into this as well.
Joining us right now, Republican Representative Tim Burchett of Tennessee. I know you're passionate about this. You've been pushing to unseal these documents. My question is why?
Well, I got involved with it. I'm disgusted with the whole thing, the supposed suicide, the cover up. It's just down the line. My colleague, Senator Marsha Blackburn, dear friend of mine, she was denied that in the Senate. I think Dick Durbin did it, I believe was the chairman. subpoena those records. What they're releasing right now, the flight records are one thing. What we want is the client list. I think that's what you need. This complete cover up of the uniparty, as we call it in Washington. You've got Republicans and Democrats on that thing. And if they're dirtbags, I say put them out. Put them out.
And he said, if they're dirtbags, put them out.
Let them put them in the court of public opinion, because those people, dadgummit, this thing has just gone on too long, and this is what they do. They drag this thing out. If this was you or me, it'd be on the front page of the paper in every paper in the country, but it's not. It's the elite in this country, in this world, and they call the shots, and they call the shots in our legal system as well as the Congress of the United States of America.
There is a whole other world. I mean, if you think about it, there are a million ecosystems across the country and around the globe that you'd have to be inside to really understand. Is the name of someone on these client lists, or the flight logs, which you've asked for as well, is it guilt by association, or is it merely that you want full transparency? Because just because somebody engaged or interacted with him, does that make them guilty of anything?
No, and it could be business clients. There could be business retreats on this island. It doesn't necessarily mean they went over there for sex with underage girls. But I do believe that they should be put out there and then let them make their case for it. That's why I'm not so concerned with the flight logs. Mm-hmm. I want the little black book. Why is this being held back? It's been well over a year since Epstein was allowed to die, however he did die. That's still a question. I still have a question in my mind. The most talked about prisoner in the country, possibly the world at that time. And just so happens the cameras broke and his guards weren't watching him at that time. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot to be answered in this whole thing. It's a cover up. We'll never know all the answers because, our judicial system, our Justice Department, in my opinion, is compromised. And this is just another example of them proving that.
Well, a lot of people would say our justice system has been politicized. Do you think that Jeffrey Epstein has become any part of a distraction? I mean, he is not the only wealthy, connected man on the planet who had unsavory connections, who had a sex island. Has he become somewhat of a catch-all for the violence and for the just criminality of a whole network of people who are still living today?
I think the thing is, the reason why there's more focus on Jeffrey Epstein is because he had so many connections with powerful people. And not just other people in business or finance, but we're talking about politicians. We're talking about royalty. Right? He had connections with Prince Andrew. He had connections with so many powerful people in powerful positions, and people with a lot of money, man. And I think that's why the focus is so much on him. However, to her point, no, he's not the only one. And we're going to get into one of them right after this, because I believe there is a connection between deciding to release 150 names on that list and what was just revealed yesterday about the Diddy case.
Yes, ma'am. I think partially, but also it just shows the disconnect that these people have with the rest of us, and how they think they can flaunt the laws of our laws and laws of nature, for that matter. Just the perversion of these folks with having sex with minors, to me, is enough. They need to be locked up and thrown. I mean, I proposed in Tennessee the death penalty, and it actually passed, but it was thrown out as unconstitutional. So I just think we need to get this out there. I think these folks need to be exposed, and and if they're Republicans, if they're Democrats, so be it. I'm sick of it. There should be no cover up. They should have nowhere to hide.
Representative Tim Burchett.
It should not matter what political affiliation you have. It shouldn't matter what political party you belong to. Like, this is just wrong. So there should be no focus on that. The focus should be on the crime and what was done, and making sure that those women receive some kind of justice other than a check. That's how I look at it. As long as those people are out there, they could still be continuing those crimes just through someone else. So you got Jeffrey Epstein. That doesn't mean that this stopped. It didn't stop. In fact, we talked about the story a couple of weeks ago about Cassie and Diddy. Now, Cassie was an R&B singer. Everybody knows Diddy, rapper, producer, but I don't think he's a great rapper. We can talk about that another time. At one point, they were in a relationship, etc. And she came out recently saying that she was a part of a human trafficking ring that Diddy had. Now, later on, we found out they settled that really quick. It was only a couple of days. And the next thing you know, the next report was that Diddy has decided to settle with Cassidy, right? So in a civil way, there's going to be lump sum pay. However, it appears that even though Cassie decided to take the settlement, she has not decided to not release the documentation that she has. In fact, it could not just incriminate Diddy, but other people as well, including a pastor. Let's get into it. This is from Misha. It says, TD Jakes did what? Wait for it.
Anything, this is allegedly. Ain't nobody gonna catch me slipping, okay? Okay. So allegedly, Cassie has turned over evidence to the feds. Yes, to the feds. She has turned over videotapes, a USB drive, and Kim Porter's burner phone. Now, there is also an alleged email out saying a plethora of other things that include TD Jakes with Diddy. I'm gonna let y'all listen to it. I'm not finna say nothing else.
Says here, yo, bro, Cassie has turned over substantial amounts of evidence to the feds. I'm told that after Cassie had a long conversation with blank, I have to protect this person. They're going through a lot right now. And her lawyers, she finally was convinced to give up the videotapes and audio recordings that contain footage of S parties and other private gatherings that feature some pretty powerful and prominent people.
Let me pause here. I want to just reiterate, she has turned documentation over to the feds.
And get this, she even gave up a burner phone and USBs that belong to Kim Porter with incriminating evidence against Diddy.
Pause. For those who don't know who this is, Kim Porter was Diddy's baby's mama. They were in a relationship at one point in time. They never married. Diddy said he never wanted to get married. He couldn't be committed to one person. That's what he said. To each their own. But think about that for a minute. But they had twins together. She died rather oddly, just kind of came out of nowhere. So I wanted to say that to you so you understand like what they're talking about when they say like there was a burner phone with incriminating evidence against Diddy.
I'm told that there are a slew of artists, politicians, and entertainers that are about to be exposed and arrested for H10. I'm paraphrasing there, okay? H10. I'm told that Cassie's husband played a significant role in getting Cassie to turn over the evidence. It's to my understanding that Cassie felt that by exposing the truth, it would also make her look like a filthy Moor. And I'm paraphrasing there because some of the videos she turned in, it shows her getting number one, okay, guys? I'm paraphrasing again, and committing more disgusting acts that she was forced to do.
So in these documents, there's also video footage. So apparently Diddy, either he recorded this or other people recorded it, but she has video evidence.
I'm also told that multiple male escorts corroborated the fact that TD Jakes have slept with multiple men at Diddy's parties and abroad, and they refer to him as being a power bottom. Wow. It's also been said that a young male has acquired a lawyer to represent him as he is set to sue Jakes for an incident that took place when he was just years old. It's been said that the young man was forced to perform sloppy toppy, and I'm paraphrasing here, guys. You can actually put two and two together to understand what I'm trying to say. It's been said that the man's family were members of the Potter's House, but left the church in 2015. According to multiple church insiders, the parents were paid off to keep quiet. The guy's a grown man now and is seeking his own justice.
Let me pause here for a second. For those who don't know, TD Jakes, famous pastor, has written several books. He's a pastor of a mega church, kind of like Clef Lil Dollar as well. So one of the allegations, I guess, that Cassidy is releasing as well is the fact that TD Jakes was apparently a part of this sex trafficking ring or whatever of Diddy's, which also included a minor, according to this, again, allegedly. This is not good, people.
It's been said that the young man doesn't even deal with his parents even to this day because they took hush money. According to Pastor Blank, and I have to protect this pastor, Bishop Jakes is about to get railroaded and all of his dirt will be exposed. That's why the bishop has quietly lawyered up. He sees his fall from grace coming.
Just don't look good for nobody. And when I say nobody, I mean nobody. Hollywood is being turned upside down. Jeffrey Epstein's list is going to come out. If this is actually true, this list is going to come out, and we already know TD Jakes is caught up with the other shit, allegedly being the person that is messing with Christian Keys. Everybody's saying it's either allegedly TD Jakes or allegedly Tyler Perry. It's either one of them, but oh my God, if this is true, buckle up, because next year, 2024, y'all better get y'all bingo cards out, because it's going to get real.
Now, who's to say, or how do we not know that these two situations aren't connected? Think about the timing. The fact that this list of this Epstein list is going to be released as early as January 1st. And then Cassie, even after having that settlement with Diddy, she still decided to release the documents to the feds. So what we could potentially see is some type of overlap here. Was Diddy on that plane? Was TD Jakes on that plane? I don't know. I don't have evidence to say that it happened, but look at the timing. And 2024 is going to be wild. Just wait for it, folks. Wait for it. I don't know. It's all coming out now. A lot of things are being revealed. And Cassie's friend also came forward with some things to say too. She now also has a witness coming forward as well. So Diddy, you might have settled with Cassie, but Cassie is not done with you.
Music mogul and rapper Sean Diddy Combs has faced 4 different lawsuits in recent weeks alleging sexual assault and abuse, all of which he has denied. The first of those came from singer Cassie Ventura, known as Cassie, who accused Combs of sexual abuse and sex trafficking during the decade they were together. NBC's entertainment correspondent Chloe Malas spoke exclusively to a longtime friend of Cassie's who said she witnessed some troubling incidents. Chloe?
Good evening, Ellison. Singer-songwriter, activist Tiffany Reid had been working with Cassie on an album when she first met Diddy and says that she witnessed him verbally abusing her friend. Following Cassie's settlement with Diddy, Reid penned an open letter in Rolling Stone about her experience. She spoke to me about the events that she says traumatized her.
I don't think people understand what it's like to be traumatized by somebody famous and rich, because you can't get away from them.
Tiffany Reid has written for the likes of Zendaya, Jason Derulo, and Jennifer Hudson. In 2015, she became friends with Cassie while writing songs for her album. At that point, Cassie and Diddy had been together for nearly 8 years. In a lawsuit Cassie filed last month, she detailed the abuse she says Diddy committed, including physical assault. Reid says although she did not know about the alleged physical assault while working with Cassie, she did witness verbal abuse on more than one occasion, one of which took place during Cassie's 29th birthday in 2015. Reid says Diddy showed up at karaoke where Cassie and a group of friends were celebrating.
So he had her back into the corner and he was like cussing her out with his hand in her face.
Later that night, Reid, who was staying at Cassie's home, says she awoke to screaming.
He's standing in the living room area and she's there and he was like, emotional singing, there you are. And I just was like, oh, he's talking to me. And I remember, I don't know if you know what his voice sounds like, but I felt like I was in the presence of his monster inside. And I remember looking in his eyes and I said to him, what did y'all do? Because I could see that she was really sedated. That was the first time I ever seen her high before. And then he says, tell your girl she wants some birthday. And we were like, well, I mean, he's saying this to me and I'm like, well, she doesn't have to have sex with you if she doesn't want to. He was upset. I guess that she didn't want to do with him whatever he wanted. I don't know. I don't feel like I could advocate for myself in that moment. Like, I realized, like, oh, this guy is dangerous.
Reid says it was only a few months ago that Cassie told her what was really going on that night in 2015, that it all stemmed from the music executive wanting her to take part in what he called a freak-off against her will.
What did Cassie tell you about these freak-offs?
Now, I'll tell you this much. When I lived in New York, I heard rumors about Diddy back then. This was years ago. I was in my early 20s, and I heard rumors that Diddy used to have these sex parties. Now, keep in mind, I didn't know that meant anything in reference to human trafficking, which is what one of the things that Cassie is speaking about. But I had heard the rumors that he used to have these wild, crazy sex parties, whatever. I didn't know anybody was being held against their will. I didn't know anybody was being forced to do something that they obviously did not consent to. And I definitely did not know anything about no human trafficking part. So it just, when she talks about the attitude that Diddy had, it does kind of remind me of something, though. If you go back and you watch Making the Band, start with the Danity Kane one. Don't start with Dylon, all right? And they went to go get like a cheesecake in Brooklyn. But if you look at the season where Danity Kane comes together, look at the way he used to talk to the women. That was something I always paid attention to. Like, I was just like, why is he speaking to them like that? Like, I felt like he did not have a lot of respect for the women, especially when it came to their physical appearance. Some of the things that he said on that show, I don't think he would get away with saying today on a reality show, thinking back on it. So just FYI.
That he would hire these like sex workers and like they would have, sex with her or whatever. And he would watch and tell them what to do.
In her lawsuit, Cassie alleges she was forced to participate in freak-offs throughout her relationship with Diddy. Reid learning recently one horrific detail from Cassie.
She told me the only time he was willing to do anything or work on her music, go through any plans, any of that, was when she had a freak off. So all of our music, all my work, to find out that like I spent all these years writing these songs for him to rape my friend to, like, is just disgusting.
In the lawsuit, Cassie detailed the physical abuse she says Diddy committed, including an instance where she was put in a hotel room for days to heal. Reid says Cassie recently told her about Diddy giving her a black eye before the premiere of her 2016 film, The Perfect Match.
I remember one time her telling me that, I think it might have been The Perfect Match, that movie that she was in. And she told me that she had a black eye under her makeup.
Do you believe Diddy is a dangerous person?
Yes, I do.
Why?
I mean, look at his rap sheet.
An attorney for Cassie declined to comment. Diddy's attorney did not respond. In 2015, Diddy was arrested on 3 counts of assault with a deadly weapon and other charges for allegedly beating up his son's football coach. Prosecutors declined to file felony charges related.
You guys hearing this stuff? He beat up his son's football coach. Why? Like, who just gets away with that? Failed to file to file charges. Like, what?
To that arrest. 24 hours after Cassie filed her lawsuit, she and Diddy announced that they had reached an undisclosed settlement. Combs released a statement saying, "We have decided to resolve this matter amicably. I wish Cassie and her family all the best." His lawyer adding that the settlement was, quote, "in no way an admission of wrongdoing."
I mean, I just feel like it's PR. He's settled because he doesn't want to go to court.
Diddy's music career spans 3 decades, including 3 Grammy Awards and the creation of Bad Boy Records, representing artists from Mary J. Blige to the late Notorious B.I.G. In September, he was awarded MTV's Global Icon Award. But since the allegations surfaced, Hulu scrapped a reality series about his family, and the Recording Academy said they are considering to rescind his invite to this year's Grammys.
I think a lot of people, especially in the Black community, are, I've seen the narrative of like, they just trying to take a Black man down. And it's just like, that's not what this is about. That's not what this is about. This is about accountability and a reckoning. Like, that's just the bottom line.
As for
because I've had people tell me that too, and I'm like, no. Listen, Cassie says she has documents that she's passed over to the feds. That'll reveal all. That'll reveal all. And I'm pretty sure it may take other people down too. So get ready for that. But I believe I would not be surprised if this Diddy trafficking ring and this Epstein trafficking ring, I would not be surprised if at some point or another it did not cross paths. Honey. And then they mentioned Bad Boy, and that was the funny part to me, because when I think about Bad Boy Records, I think about all these one-hit wonders, because Diddy was not that great of a producer in reference to sustaining a career for an artist. They would come out with that one album, and it would be a great hit, and you never hear from these peeps again. What happened to Total? Someone go bring back Craig Mack. What happened to all these people? Mary J. Blige was the only one to have a long-lasting career. The rest of them, or they were killed, like Biggie. We'll see if this is all connected, guys. We'll see. Let me go to the comments. We are going to do call-in tonight. Valerie says 3 names remaining unsealed. Someone in office, probably in close to the White House, U.S. House, Senate, or a SCOTUS judge. They're capable of anything unethical as hell. Thank you for the super chat, Dwayne. Epstein worked for Mossad. They wanted dirt of a sexual nature on every U.S. politician. We're going to talk about it tonight, guys. Thank you for the super chat, Dijon. Bibi Netanyahu could be one of 2. JB says, question, is this why some people also wouldn't speak out against Israel because Mossad knows all this? Why didn't Tyler Perry speak out? He's a billionaire and not bound by Hollywood. Ooh, good questions. And Robert says, Dylon. That's how Dylon, if you guys haven't seen Making the Band, like that's what we're making fun of Dylon, because Dylon used to be like, I am Dylon. And Diddy was like, I want you to walk to Brooklyn and go get me a cheesecake. And they did that shit. Hell no, I ain't walking to no damn Brooklyn. That's a long ass walk. We're going to finish with this clip, something I just want you to think about. When we talk about like follow the money and who really controls everything in this country, the billionaires. Here's another example of that, how the government has all this money, but they just don't want to give us any of that money. First and foremost, smash that like button. Thank you so much. I think this is a good way to exit. And then I'll put the call-in link in the chat while this plays. We're getting screwed by our corrupt government. Listen to this, guys. Follow her on TikTok. She's awesome.
12% of the money that is earned goes into Social Security. So in recent years, we have been putting in about $2.4 trillion worth of money into the Social Security Trust. Now, the U.S. government pays out about $1.4 trillion in benefits from Social Security. So there is typically a surplus. Now, when I digged a little deeper, there has always been a surplus in Social Security. There's always been extra money after we all pay in at the end of the year or whatever, or throughout the year. Now, Congress decided to borrow money from Social Security to the tune of over $2 trillion. They borrowed the money from Social Security. Now, a lot of people are like, oh, that's good. They borrowed the money because they borrowed the money and they also have to pay interest from borrowing the money. So it'd be about $150 million worth of interest from the money that Congress borrowed from the Social Security. Here is why I'm losing my mind. How is Congress going to pay back the $2 trillion that they took from Social Security? Because Congress, y'all see where I'm going with this?
Yep.
Congress, the money that Congress has is our tax dollars from our property taxes, our income taxes, sale taxes, all that shit. So basically, Congress is going to take the tax-paying money of the American people to pay back the money they borrowed from the American people, and then charge the American people the interest to pay with The money they borrowed. Am I making sense? What the fuck is going on? What is going on? This whole tax bullshit seems like a Ponzi scheme at this point. You are borrowing money from the American people and claiming to pay us back by taking.
And it goes on more. Follow her on TikTok. Her name is at God Desmia. God and then DESSMIA 20_1. Follow her on TikTok. She's hilarious. Like, she has a good way of breaking things down when it comes to the government just screwing over the American people, just keeping it real. But yeah, these are just some of the things that they do. We are going to do call-ins. So let me go ahead and share that here. The link is pinned to the top of the chat, so you can join that way. And yeah, let me go ahead and share it here so you can see. I'm pretty sure there's lots to discuss. I usually do like one call in a week, but tonight stories are pretty interesting. So I figure people may want to chat. You can catch me over there. This is call-in episode 142. Trump removed, Epstein's list, and more, and whatever else you guys want to talk about. Again, that link is pinned to the top of the chat. So I'm going to go ahead and bow out, and I'll see you guys over there. You know how we do this. Oh, don't forget tomorrow, Rick Sterling will be here with me. He's the gentleman that wrote the article about JFK that we talked about the other day. So he'll be here tomorrow night. Don't miss it. Have a good night. Keep up the fight.